Hello and welcome to Not the 12 Bell Live. And this is a bit bizarre, isn't it? Because this is not at all what we expected we would be doing today. We, of course, should be in Sheffield. But stay with us. Don't worry. We're going to take you behind the scenes of the contest. Not just the things that we normally cover on the broadcast, but we're going to go back in time to see where it all started. We're going to go on a journey, bringing you right up to the present day and seeing how ringers are coping with these very strange circumstances. And as ever, we are very keen that this is your show. So although you see me here, we are sharing messages of what you are getting up to today for the next 3 hours and how you are celebrating and marking the occasion. So although we can't be together in reality, we can be together online, and we very much hope that you will get involved with the show. I can already see from my screens here messages coming in, and we've got Matt Tosh standing by. He's going to be harvesting all the messages and feeding those to me as we go through the broadcast. There we are. We can see him. Give us a wave, Matt. He is in our secret basement. So I've got the team with me this year, but we are all in different locations. The only person in here with me at the moment, hiding in the corner, is Rob Convey. Rob, don't you just stick your head in on this shot so people can just see that you're here. There he is. So there's his hands. So we are very much working as a team, and I have my trusty producer, Gareth Lawson, who is in another location and is controlling all the technical aspects of the show. There he is. Great to be working with you all. So, as I said, we want you to get involved with today's show, and up next, we'll give you all the details on how you can do that.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we'd love to hear from you.
Now, this is slightly unusual because we are doing it in vision, so it's running a bit more like a television show. It's not the way that we normally do it, of course. We run this broadcast, which we've been doing since 2013. It's gone very, very quickly when back in Ripon. And we are running this as a TV show, and we'll be displaying your messages, and you'll be able to see the people that we've been talking to over the past 3 weeks. It's been quite a mammoth effort to turn the show around for you in a relatively short amount of time and on a shoestring budget. We are, of course, indebted to John Taylor and Co., the Bell founders, who have supported this year's special broadcast and enabled us to bring these pictures to you. And we thought we'd give it a bit more of a special push, because I know some of you are set up with, well, in fact, I'm looking at my screen and this is torture. There are people sending in pictures of what they're eating at the moment. So thank you very much for that. We really appreciate that. We haven't got any more food in the studio, but that may change as we go on. But we're going to push it a bit further, and we are running a competition, a quiz. Now, what you need to do if you want to take part in this quiz is get yourself over to the 12 Bell website. That's 12bell.org.uk, 12bell.org.uk. And David Hull has very kindly put up our quiz questions. Now, David is a bit of a quiz fiend, but this is the key thing. All of the answers to the quiz, and I think there's 18 to 20 questions, can be found in today's broadcast. Right, there you go. So with all of the answers to the quiz are in today's broadcast. You then email your answers to our studio email address, so 12bellstudio@gmail.com, to be in by midnight tonight. And there is a prize. Our prize is a cream tea picnic hamper being sent directly to your house. So if you fancy getting your hands on that, and I can tell you what's in it, we've got the list here. We've got Devon scones. That will upset the Cornish, won't it? We're nodding back to Exeter's win last year. That's what we're doing, honestly. We've got clotted cream, strawberry jam, a tea selection pack, some cookies, fudge oat crunch cookies, Devon Heaven luxurious truffles as well. So if you want to get your hands on that, get yourself over to 12bell.org.uk, download the questions and pay attention to the broadcast. Now, to help me with the broadcast, as I said, I've got the broadcast team behind the scenes, but we're also going to have some guests, some live guests. And our first guest in the first hour of today's show is going to be Steph Warboys. She's joining us on Skype. I don't know whether we've got her on the line just yet. No, she's going to be joining us very, very soon. She's going to help us reflect on the early days of the contest, because back in 2004, she wrote an article that looked at the start of our contest as we know it today. And prior to that, ringing on 12 bells wasn't that well established. So we thought we'd go to one of the experts on this, one of the people that's been involved in the contest right from the word go, a very well-known Mr. Andrew Wilby. And he's going to describe now what ringing was like in the 1960s. So we'll be talking to him in a moment. I've just been told he's not quite there yet. This show is live, and you have to bear with us. We were a little bit late getting on the air because we had to change our YouTube stream. Bit annoying because I don't know what happened. The event fell over. So thank you for those of you for your patience. And if you are just joining us, this is the real show. It is live. We're coming to you from Bristol, and I've got my team in various locations helping run the show as well. Don't forget, we are looking for your messages. What are you up to this afternoon? Have you got your own little ringers picnic going on in your kitchen? Have you cracked open a beer already? I think we can do that. It's gone 1 o'clock. So if you're sitting down having your lunch, or if you want to send a message to other ringers, because it's not easy at the moment, we're not able to get into our towers at the moment. So if we can help each other get some messages out, we're spreading positivity. In fact, we have a very special message for you. I've just been told. We have a message from Sheffield Cathedral. Okay, so this is the very Reverend Peter Bradley, who has put together a very special message for us. So over to you, Peter.
Welcome to Sheffield Cathedral. It's good to welcome you here today, but it would have been much, much better to welcome you for the competition, which we're so looking forward to. It's a very hard time for all of us, I think, at the moment, especially facing such an uncertain future. I find that actually working in a building like this, that's been here for a good 1,000 years, including for most of that time its tower, working in a building like this gives me a sense of perspective and confidence. In this building, our parish community has got through the Black Death, plague, the Reformation, and the church being turned into stables under Cromwell, and most recently a fire, the First World War, the Second World War, and here we are now towards the end of COVID. As a community, we have got through all of these major challenges with God's help. And I'm very confident indeed that in a few months' time, if not back to normal, we'll be back to a new normal and confidently able to welcome people into the cathedral. We do hope that it'll be possible for the competition to come here in the next few years, if not actually next year. And I just want to assure you that people in Sheffield will be even more pleased to welcome you to Sheffield for the competition. All good wishes and prayers. Farewell for the moment from Sheffield.
What a lovely message there from Peter Bradley, very Reverend Peter Bradley, Dean of Sheffield Cathedral, and I very much hope we will be able to get back to Sheffield at some point. In the third hour of the show, we will be looking ahead to next year's contest and how the preparations are shaping up and what to expect over the next couple of years. So the studio guests that we'll have in the final hour will be the contest chairman and secretary, so that's Mark Bell and Hayley Barnett. But I am very pleased, I have been told, that Steph Warboys is now ready and waiting to talk to us. Hello, Steph, are you there?
Hi, Matthew. I'm here. Hopefully everything's working fine. Hello, ringers of the world. Nice to speak to you.
It's lovely to have you here. So, first of all, how are you doing? How are you coping with the situation?
I went to Sheffield University and rang there in the early 80s. Unfortunately, I couldn't take part in the 1996 competition in Sheffield, but died this week was in charge at the cathedral. So it's good to remember him.
It is, yes. Very fond memories of Ron as well in Bristol here, because a lot of us rang with him. So, Steph, you're going to be with us for certainly for this first hour of the show. And I particularly wanted to talk to you because you wrote an article in 2004 in the Ringing World, which
To me, it's the best day in the ringing calendar because everybody is there, or so many people are there, and everybody is welcome to be there. So people you don't know, you get introduced to, you bump into, everybody's friendly, it's sociable, the food's good, and normally there's wonderful ringing going on in the background, if actually anyone is listening to it, apart from the judges, of course. It's just got such a big thing over the years. They were much smaller in the old days, and the standards are really high. Exeter, Cambridge, Oxford, really big events with 1,000 people. Brilliant, but very friendly.
Most of the people I spoke to when we were doing our interviews all commented on what the contest has done for the standard of 12 bell ringing, raising its awareness, making it more accessible. Of course, we've got more rings of 12 available now. And I thought it'd be really good just to get a sort of context, a background to where this all started. And that's why we spoke to Andrew Wilby. I'm going to check if the video is ready. No, okay, we're trying to get Andrew Wilby. We spoke to him about 1960s ringing, and it really wasn't that well established, was it?
I don't think so. What I can tell you about the change in the standards is from 1978, when the contest was first at Birmingham, and it was the first time it was recorded. Strike 12, the cassette is, and if you go back and listen to that, the best standard of ringing that day would have got you into a final. I think only the winners would have got to the final, and the rest definitely wouldn't have got through, and it wouldn't have got you probably for even 5th or 6th place. The standard is enormously higher this year. It's been such a focus for bands to actually, do more on 12, get together and actually focus and try and improve. The actual bands should be constituted. They should have a regular association with the centre that they're representing. So they should be ringing regularly there all the time, and hopefully aiming to achieve good striking all the time. I'm not sure that everybody needs to do something particularly different to try and produce good ringing just on contest day, but it certainly, the competition has also spawned now lots of regional events. There's the London 12 bell, the Southwest 12 bell, the Northwest 12 bell, the George Pipe, the Robert B. Smith. So the popularity of ringing on 12 has actually spawned these feeder competitions, which I think is really great, because that gives people the confidence then to go on and enter the main competition.
Brilliant stuff. We will be looking at that history and some of those key people that were involved early on. And we mustn't forget as well that the personalities, sadly, some of them are not around anymore, but some of the, I'm going to say shenanigans, but some of the funny stories that we experience these days with ringing were also happening back in the hundreds of years ago at the start of ringing, of course, and we've been able to capture some of those, and we will be sharing those with you through the stories. Steph, can I just ask you? I know you've been featured quite a lot over the years, and you've had TV crews trailing you on certain years. But are there any particular years of the contest that stick out in your mind?
Well, personally, of course, the competition in Birmingham in the year 2000, because I was the chief organiser that year, and all sympathy to people who actually have to organise the competition and ring in it. That was a big deal, but we really knocked the ringing out of the park that day. Won by 18%, and we had a fantastic day. It was back in the days where the pubs would let you drink on the pavement outside Birmingham Cathedral. It was just fantastic. That was a brilliant day, as was Oxford, which was the culmination of 5 in a row at Oxford. But just sitting there getting the results at Christchurch Hall in Harry Potter Hall with the drawer in the sorting hat, it just had atmosphere. We rang really well that day. The only thing that was wrong with that day is it did have a little bit of rain, so we had to spend a little bit more time in the marquee than we might have had otherwise. But otherwise, it was a perfect day.
Well, the good news is that weather's not going to affect us today. Well, let's hold our conversation there. We're going to listen to what ringing was like in the 1960s with Andrew Wilby. Don't you love it when things are being done live? I can hear people screaming in my ear, there's no audio. We will try and fix Andrew Wilby. We'll plug him in and turn his volume on, but it is worth listening to because it gives you that background information. Welcome to you if you've just joined us. We are broadcasting live from Bristol, beaming this around the world and looking back at the history of the 12 Bell contest. I am aware that quite a lot of people are watching. I've got a picture of a seagull has just appeared on my screen. Liz Evans has been tweeting us. She says, a bit of a picnic at the start of the broadcast as I found this little cheeky bird that got into my flat. She's tweeted us using the hashtag 12Bell. If you are on Twitter, it's worth following the hashtag 12Bell because you can see what other people are tweeting about today. So people are already sharing pictures. We've got Plants Molly Louise Smith has said, our picnic for Not the 12Bell is Bailey's milkshakes on the way. Very nice. And we'll try and get some more of those messages out as well. The Association of Ringing Teachers is spreading the message as well, saying get your beverage ready and enjoy as we are live. So we'll keep that one going there. So you can tweet us at National 12Bell. We've also got our Facebook page as well, and we've got Matt Thusey who's kind of amassing our emails as well. So if you want to email me and with your messages, that is 12bellstudio@gmail.com. I'm just going to find out if we've got Andrew Wilby's. No, still not. So this is great stuff of doing things live, of course. So, Steph, I'll just come back to you. The contest, the very first contest that we had was a pilot contest, wasn't it? It wasn't actually the 12 Bell contest as we know it.
That's the way I understand it. It was for the Emmeline Hancock Trophy, I believe, and it was all the idea of Patrick J. Bird in Bristol. It was the Bristol Ringers that actually got everyone together, and Leicester, I think, won the first competition, so they got the responsibility for organising the return match the next year.
Which, of course, was not at all a poison chalice in any way, but it was it's a very, very important event. So Emmeline Hancock, he was known by local ringers as Fred Hancock, and he was the tower captain at St Mary Redcliffe here in Bristol. And you're absolutely right. Pat Bird was an ideas man, and he floated this idea, and we'll hear how those ideas materialised once we fixed our sound with our videos, which was working about half an hour ago. So I'm not quite sure what's happened there. I'm just wondering whether I've trodden on a wire. That would be awful, wouldn't it, if I've trodden on a wire in here and broken my connection to wherever Gareth is at the moment. So we will be hearing more about that. Steph, when did you first get involved in the contest?
So my first touch with the contest was in 1985 at Canterbury Cathedral, ringing for the Cumberlands. I'd newly arrived, new job in London after university at Sheffield, and that was a famous occasion because the CYs actually miscalled their touch of Stedman. And it's absolutely amazes me, because I can't call Stedman for toffee, that's the only time it has ever happened. Wow. I had no idea how we'd done that day. I just enjoyed the day, rang, met so many people, was introduced to lots of people, met a new boyfriend there. Yeah, it was brilliant. That was the first time. And I rang for the Cumberlands for 5 years, including my first win, which was at Redcliffe again. And that was a huge surprise to me when we won, because I got no idea. Just at that stage of my career, I just went up there and tried to do my best. I got no idea really whether we were producing anything of any standard. But we did win that day, but it was very close. It was only 0.5%. And that started a bit of controversy about how the competition should be judged, whether you marked faults, whether you marked it a percentage. They started talking about should there be artistic impression. These days, the judges are told unofficially not to ever make it quite as close as that. Because if you're clear on the results, let's announce a clear result. And of course, we got Hawkeye now. We got the machine judging, so that helps it out. But it was the beginning of what I perceived as quite a bit of judging controversy during the 90s.
And there have been many, many debates about the judging, the mechanisms of judging. And in hour 2 of the show, we will be hearing from judges. We've also got Katie Town, very experienced judge, and also ringing master. She won with the College Youths back in Norwich. And we'll be talking to her about what it's like judging. And we'll be talking to some of the developers of Hawkeye as well, and the strikeometer. Again, another source of debate for many ringers as well, and not a topic that's fresh to us here at our 12 Bell broadcast as well. Can I just mention, we are very grateful for the support of Taylors & Co, who have supported us with the broadcast this year. This whole thing has had to be turned around in an incredibly short amount of time. I am aware that I've put my usual team under an incredible amount of pressure. The fact that I'm able to talk to you, Steph, today is a wonder of technology. But actually, I'm not just talking to you and you're not just talking to me. We are talking to ringers all around the world. And when we get our audio working again, we'll be able to see some of the idents that have come in, because we ran an ident challenge for ringers around the world. And we had people literally from all over the world sending them in. So it's great that we've got this community. And Steph, I just wanted to ask you, one of the things that still strikes me about ringing in general, so moving away from competition ringing, is that welcome that we get when we move around the country. I still have difficulty explaining that to non-ringers. What do you think it is that pulls us together like that? Why is ringing unique like that?
It must be the culture, isn't it? Because it's the reception that we got when we first rolled up, and you were made welcome. One of the most important things for me is the intergenerational aspect, and I do hope the COVID situation doesn't change that, with obviously greater pressures on older ringers as we go forward. But it's one of the very few things where I think younger ringers are genuinely on level terms with older ringers. And because we were welcomed, taught for nothing, invested in for hours and hours and hours, people explaining methods, people explaining how to strike, people teaching, giving you opportunities, driving to other places, and all that before you're even old enough to get to the pub and really enjoy the full social aspects of it. I think it's the culture that we've grown up with, and we've never really challenged it, and we've embraced it, in fact.
And why not, indeed? I mean, I remember when I first moved away from university, or university itself, university ringing societies. We'll hear from some student ringers a little bit later. But when I moved away into a new area, I moved to South Wales, and just how quickly I was accepted, when I was in the pub talking to ringers. And my colleagues were trying to arrange orientation visits for where I'd moved to, but we were already ahead of the game with the ringers, and much to their envy. So you're absolutely right. There is this amazing culture that we have. Now, messages on my screen. People have been busy tweeting, okay, because they are watching us, Steph. And JJ's been to it, says, hello, found the working link. Yay, enjoying this. Phil Barnes has commented on Mr. Wilby. He says, try to... I know, it's great, isn't it? He says, try to fix Andrew Wilby. Good luck with that. He's tweeted us using the hashtag 12bell. So that hashtag is there. That's that there. I said Molly Smith has been in touch and saying hello there. Linda Garton is following us on Twitter as well. I'm going to have a little peek at our Facebook page as well. Just remind you, we've got the email address. So if you want to email us any photos of what you're up to, it's 12bellstudio@gmail.com. And please do bear with us whilst we sort out this problem with our sound. I'm wondering whether a seagull has gnawed through our cable. And let's just have a look. Now I'm told we can move on. So there is an issue with Andrew Wilby's sound on that video. So what am I going to do? Thank you for bearing with us. We will look at the 1970s now, from the start of the contest. Where did the idea of a 12-bell contest start? We heard Steph a little bit earlier saying it was Pat Bird who mentioned it. let's go to Heather Kippin, one of the Bristol ringers of that time. She'll explain how it all happened.
Not throughout the country there wasn't, but there was in a few centres.
When my producer presses the right button. It's okay. I am putting people under a lot of pressure here. We're doing very well. So this is we'll go to, let's play that video again, because that video there that we just saw is Fran Dodds explaining ringing, how many 12 bell centres there were in that early competition time.
Not throughout the country there wasn't, but there was in a few centres of excellence. London was seen as a centre of excellence, Birmingham, Manchester. There were established centres where 12 bell ringing, only at sort of Cambridge, Yorkshire and possibly Londinium level. It certainly wasn't up to the standard nowadays.
There were fewer 12 bell towers. If you think of the West Country, Exeter at that time was nothing like as strong as it is today. There was nothing virtually going on at Taunton, very little at Trowbridge. Cheltenham was a bit stronger. Not so sure over the water at Newport. Llandaff were still 10. So there wasn't the opportunity to ring on 12 that there is today, with all the additional 12s which have come on stream in the last 40 years.
So that gives us a bit of the background. And as I was saying, Pat Bird came up with this idea of a trial contest, is how it happened.
Yes, it was in the pub at Redcliffe after we'd had one of our branch practices there, and we were sitting in the pub. We had quite a good practice by our standards then, and Pat suddenly said, "Well, I've been thinking, do you think perhaps we should have a 12-bell competition?" And out of that little seed, it grew.
Well, the very first competition
I love that.
wasn't part of the main.
I love that, how a lot of our ideas are spawned in the pub. I'm sure, Steph, you can identify with that. Lots of peels and things are planned in the pub.
They are.
So what we're doing now, we're setting the scene of what was going on in the 1970s, and that spawned an idea for this trial competition, and they did call it a competition, which caused a bit of an issue because it actually meant, well, for one team, they didn't want to come and join in, and you'll hear about that in a moment. But the very first contest was held in Bristol at St Mary Redcliffe, and it was held in memory of Fred Hancock, Emlyn Hancock. So if you see peel boards with E. Hancock on it, it's Emlyn Hancock. He was the former ringing master at St Mary Redcliffe here in Bristol. And he spearheaded a very famous set of recordings. There was an LP made, ringing the bells. And this was due to be released, but unfortunately it was released after his death. And so he passed away before he got to see the album that was released by, I think it was Sadisc Records. This was in the 1970s. So the first contest was done in his memory. And, well, let's hear how it all shaped up. Well,
The very first competition wasn't part of the mainstream, what is known as the competition nowadays. It was an invitation-only one for what were considered elite 12-bell bands in the country.
We decided that we would invite teams. We'd put out feelers, I think, and we decided that we would invite teams. We decided 5 was probably the maximum that we could reasonably handle in terms of the time that the bells would be available, the length of time we thought at that time judges could reasonably be expected to judge 12-bell ringing. And we invited the colleges, the Commons, Birmingham and Leicester. Leicester were strong in those days. And those 4 were invited. The Cumberlands, for some reason, decided they didn't want to come. Cumberlands were run by Dennis Beresford in those days, who was another strong character. He didn't see that it was something he wanted to do and couldn't see really the point of it, and they elected not to come.
I think there were 5 teams in it. I remember the Cumberland opted not to compete because they didn't take part in in demonstration ring or whatever the phrase was.
In the event, we then searched around a bit and decided that the next team in the list really would be Reading. And so Reading came in right from the very beginning, and the Cumberlands didn't.
The Hancock Trophy suddenly popped up, but it was a one-off. It was inviting people to come to compete for the Hancock Trophy at St Mary Redcliffe. And with the Leicester Ringers, off we went. It was by invitation only.
It was like, if you like, an ordinary striking competition might be these days. The teams turned up sort of late morning afternoon. Did a winners team whilst the judges were adjudicating and coming to their decisions, and then the results were given out in the church, I presume.
I was just 20 at the time. I'd been in Birmingham for a couple of years at college and got asked to ring in this contest. I'd been asked to ring in Tewkesbury Shield, the first Tewkesbury Shield, a little bit before that, in the same year. And we didn't do very well there. So the expectations weren't that high. And our Birmingham team was not particularly strong.
Nobody dared think that we were good enough to win. And so, I was kicked in and all sorts of mistakes in because of those nerves.
We didn't do very well in the first competition. After all the build-up, we got to ring first, which is never a good place to be.
It just happened to be the year when I had the privilege of being Master of the College Youths. So it fell to me to organise and actually conduct the touch rung by the College Youths at Redcliffe back in '75, the very first one.
We had a method mistake very early in the first few sixes, and that got us off to a bad start from which we never really recovered. It's a pity because in many respects we should have done well on our own bells, and I think people were disappointed. Albert Tyler was particularly cross because he felt that we had concentrated more on the organisational aspect of the day than on the ringing. I don't think Albert entirely appreciated the amount of organisation that was necessary to bring the thing off.
Now, I know that I think I've been in all but one of them. Okay. And that one I spent in the churchyard on the beer. But
my recollection of that day was lots and lots of beer.
The Birmingham Ringers did their own thing. They came on a coach and they brought beer with them in bottles and crates. And they managed to persuade the vicar of St Mary Redcliffe to let them keep their crates of beer in the church to keep it cool.
I don't think I'd rung at Redcliffe before, and of course I was bowled over by that experience.
Birmingham didn't do very well. I mean, they didn't come last like we did, but they didn't sweep the board.
And then I think after the beer and the ringing, we probably had maybe some sandwiches or something and tea, and then we had the results.
We produced an enormous amount of food, I thought, and I organised it. The other Bristol ladies in those days helped. I remember making more cakes than I can remember, being helped by a nearly 2-year-old. And we put all this food out, and these people turned up, and afterwards I said, I have never seen so much food consumed so quickly by so many people.
We were very upset, of course, to come second, a position the college youths had occupied many times since. And we had the pain of having to drive back to London, I recall, in Jim Pryor's car with Andrew Wilby in the back seat. Andrew being a member of the winning Leicester band, although he was living in London. And he did not stop talking all the way back.
I'm saying nothing at all. But some of you online are definitely saying things about Mr. Wilby, but more about that in a moment. Steph, I mean, you heard there people's reflections of that first contest. What do you make of that?
It's certainly true that it's possible to spend so much time organising it. You don't focus on the ringing. That's certainly possible. Interesting, they were nervous and preparing in their own way. But yeah, typical of Birmingham to have brought the beer.
I know, and there's a check with it on their own bus, and check with the church. Can we keep our beer in the church as well? So right from the word go, then the merrymaking has been a big feature of this contest. Although I must say, at that stage, it was still referred to as a competition. Now, why am I making a big deal of this? Well, as you'll see, the next year was when the contest began as we know it. The National 12 Bell Striking Contest. Let's find out why.
We had really no idea how successful it would be. So it wasn't our intention that it would be a regular thing, but we thought that it was possible that it might. And of course it did. That was very much down to Andrew Wilby, because the Leicester Ringers won the first competition. Andrew was in Leicester at the time. Andrew is, as I'm sure you're aware, an ideas man.
We decided that if once we got there, Pete Staniforth, who was, many people remember his name, the late Peter Staniforth, was nominated to stand up and invite everybody back to Leicester next year, which we duly did. At this point, Cumberland's said that, well, yes, if it was called a contest, they'd come, but not if it was a competition. So the word went out from us all, don't argue with it. If that's the terms, we'll call it a contest and all will be fine. So that's what we did, and the Cumberlands joined in.
We moved on to Leicester the second year. I also took for the college. I think we also second there.
So the first national contest was at St Margaret's, Leicester.
His enthusiasm ensured that the competition was repeated the next year, and his enthusiasm, I think, then led, well, for that competition to the construction of and awarding of the Taylor Trophy.
One of the things that cropped up then is just nobody did anything about a trophy, and some of the Leicester Ringers were saying, "Oh, we'll use the Hancock Trophy again." Well, that was a one-off, and I think it was already nailed up in Leicester Cathedral, and that was clearly the wrong thing. So I got on to Paul Taylor and said, could he provide a trophy, which he did. Actually, he provided the shield and said his carpenter played or something or other. So I got my father to help, and we manufactured the rest of the trophy in his workshop. And it became known as the Taylor Trophy, and Paul Taylor was appointed president of the contest, which a post he held to the end of his life.
And after that, I think the competition started to acquire a life of its own. I think Andrew has a lot to answer for. I think we have a lot to thank Andrew for, because I think without Andrew, it might well not have happened.
The number of applicants started to grow, and the judges started saying they couldn't handle more than 6 bands. It was really very, very difficult for judges in those days, with no basic experience and practice at doing it, to judge 12 bell ringing with the intensity that it has for the period of time. And the judges are saying, if you make us judge more than 6 bands, we can't guarantee we get the result right, and that sort of thing. So we had a limit of 6 to start with. It's now grown, but that meant we had to go into holding eliminators. And the background to this was, in order to organise it, we understood that the people taking part needed to put up a representative each, and there needed to be a committee to organise it. Otherwise, leaving it to an individual band would probably be a prescription for disaster, if not argument.
So this was the birth of the committee as we know it today.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was driven by needing to share the responsibility and make sure we organised a contest, basically, and not an argument, to put it that way.
So just prior to that, Andrew, if you might, if just go back, those early contests, who was deciding what was being rung? Was it by mutual decision and agreement, or was it the host tower?
the first one at Leicester, it was the Leicester Ringers decided the test piece, and because St Margaret's Leicester were fairly notorious and difficult, they thought it was going to be good fun for everybody else to be made to ring Stedman sinks till you get to 1-3-2, and then ring Cambridge from the wrong to the home. So, in other words, in those days, people thought there'd be a change of speed between Sinks and Maximus, and the poor old tenor ringer would be left ringing Maximus too fast and struggling. And they thought that would disadvantage everybody else.
That's really cruel.
See, well, that started straight away. And you could see how fatal that would be to a contest in the long term. So there was a necessity to make it more democratic, get it organised by the bands taking part, and share the responsibility for it. And that's what we did. I mean, I'm thinking of some of the meetings we held, one in a car outside St Sepulchre's Open for some reason. And some of the people who played a big part in the formation of the committee, there was John Chilcott and Mike Chilcott from St Paul's, Jim Dizerans from Reading, Chris Kippin from Bristol. Did I mention Rod Pipe from Birmingham? John Jelly from Leicester. They were some of the guiding lights who helped shape the whole thing in the first place. And, it's a team effort. And I think we really, we achieved something that's lasted.
Absolutely amazing. That's Andrew Wilby there, a fountain of knowledge, and who's been involved in the contest right from the word go. And it's been great to capture his thoughts. Steph, I just want to ask you, I mean, hearing those stories back, how does it feel?
I think it's amazing to actually hear Andrew. Well done for getting the audio. We don't normally struggle to hear Andrew, as we said. I think it's fantastic that they had the foresight to think about how to get the contest to last. Because if they hadn't set up that committee, and they hadn't, once they got the Cumberlands on board, kept those top teams at the table, it isn't just a case that the organisation might have gone awry and things might have drifted off. It wouldn't be the competition, the contest that it is today, because all the top bands enter, and they enter because they've got they win their place on the committee, and everything is decided by consensus. And there is amazingly little falling out over it. Thank goodness.
Emotions run high, though, don't they, amongst ringers at these sorts of events?
Oh, yeah. And as I said earlier, I mean, there were huge judging controversies in the early years, mainly from people who hadn't listened to most of the ringing. I mean, I was on the wrong end of that one year. I was asked to judge an eliminator at Leighton Buzzard. The judging team was Simon Linford was chief judge, and me and John Warboys, my husband, were assistant judges. So it was a decent team. And we took so much stick that day because we eliminated the College U's and the Cumberlands. And, I thought about it over the years and thought, gee, I wonder if we got the right result. And one day, Richard Burton, who's the leader of one of the leaders of the Guildford band, said, do you know, at Leighton Buzzard, that was the best that Guildford ever rung. So, with benefit of hindsight, I am pleased that we got Guildford winning that day, High Wycombe second, Leighton Buzzard as the home team, were the ones that qualified, College U's and Cumberland's eliminated fourth and fifth. But it just goes to show how hard it was judging. And listening to Andrew and Chris, of course, nobody had judged a 12-bell competition before. There were no recordings to listen to. It was really quite brave of the guys to get up and say they thought X and Y had won when everybody else thought A and B had won.
Amazing stuff. And I mean, and more of these stories and hints to the controversy and how that's been managed, shall I say, not tackled, but managed, because people have got vested interests. You've got some people who are incredibly competitive. Not everyone is competitive, as you'll hear a little bit later in the show, and how we manage that. But it's something that has had to be managed, and it is an absolute testament to the people involved and that driving force from the likes of Andrew Wilby in those early days. Just looking at the reaction on social media, we do have a lot of messages coming in and saying people are finding it absolutely fascinating hearing those stories. Yes, lots of jokes about Andrew Wilby having been quiet, but if you do genuinely get the chance to talk to him about those early days, he is fascinating. And we had quite a lot of material to trawl through and edit. So it's been a very interesting process doing that. Michael O'Hagan has been in touch on social media. He's got a picture of his dog in front of him, and his dog are watching the telly and watching the broadcast. So hello, Michael. Great to see the pictures there. And Liz Evans has recovered from the seagull incident earlier. The seagull got into her room and shooed them off. Molly Smith's got the milkshakes have been featured. They were tweeting at hashtag 12bell. And Ben Keating says he's doing some art whilst watching and remembering last year's 12 Bell contest, as he was commissioned to draw last year's venue. So he's he's got a picture there. He's tweeted. We'll try and retweet that from the 12 Bell account very shortly. That's a picture of Exeter Cathedral. But extraordinary work there. Well done, Ben. Really enjoying that. Now, ringing characters are abound, but there's one very special lady who has been involved in many, many contests. And this is impressive. With an impressive 43 finals and 24 wins under her belt. Say that in boy. 43 finals, 24 wins under her belt. Fran Dodds is considered to be a bit of a legend. And I started by asking her how it feels when she hears those statistics. Now, with an impressive 43 finals and 24 wins under her belt, it can only be Fran Dodds. When you hear those statistics, what goes through your mind?
An awful lot of time on the end of a rope, frankly. And I'm glad that I've been part of it from the word go, really.
What do you is the secret to a successful 12 band in terms of competition?
Knowing that we've got to fight for our places, especially those teams where there is enough of us to be able to do that. It makes us all want to strive to be the best we can and be part of that team, because it's such a wonderful experience on the day.
How does one make that transition from having nerves to turning it to focused energy?
It's a great deal of difficulty and a certain amount of alcohol, I think.
Spoken almost like a jazz musician. This is a topic we've talked about several times in ringing. Is for some people they mustn't touch a drop of alcohol. For others, they like a couple of pints just to smooth around the edges. May I ask, what is your secret recipe?
Well, it depends on the brew of the area. But in the old days, in the Rod Pipe days, when he was our leader, he used to discourage us all from going to the pub, preferred us to ring sober. But seeing how some people's nerves were so bad without the odd drop just to sort of calm us down, he encouraged us to, say, possibly have the odd one, the odd half. Well, in my case, it was going to be at least half a quart. Get the rhythm of it, get the feeling of it, get into the zone. That's the important thing on the day, to get into the zone.
I've witnessed that Birmingham zone when you are preparing to go up to the tower. It's I like to say there's a certain intensity about it. I can almost talk to one of you and you'll be so focused you'll almost ignore me.
Very likely, yeah. Nothing about you, Matt. It's just we are concentrating on what we've been told to do, trying to recall how we're to best present our bell. If there's a mistake, not to let it fret us, to concentrate on what we have to do, keep our bell right, try to sympathetically assist someone else who might be just floundering a bit. The odd very, very quiet, surreptitious comment, or a sort of nod and a wink, just to get them back on track.
We've had some intelligence. We had obviously talking to other people and got memory of things. There's a famous incident when Birmingham failed to qualify for an eliminator at St Martin's Leicester when the team were interrupted.
That's right. People on the stairs. It was tower visits were being allowed by the church, and we had the people going up, the visitors, just general members of the public, were being encouraged to go upstairs, but with strict instructions not to go into the ringing chamber. But at least a couple of people ignored that and came in to watch us. And of course, being lay people, they didn't realise they were disturbing us, so stood there chatting in the doorway. And it just threw us. It absolutely threw us.
I can't believe this is the tower was open for visitors, for members of the public, whilst you were competing.
Yeah, because it was a paying thing. It brought in money for the church. Yeah, I mean, it was encouraged by the church because it was a money spinner. They paid to come up to the tower, so they weren't going to miss out on that opportunity to get some money in.
I'm wondering whether there's a sort of extreme version of a competition where you almost let people in around the edges to see if they can distract a team and see who can concentrate the best.
Well, we did wonder whether that the opposition had sent some particularly boisterous characters up for our lot. The suspicion was there.
Oh, this is getting contentious. Excellent. Now, the first time you rang the fifth for Birmingham, you won. You were second at York Minster in 1980 when you changed to the fourth for just 1 year, and since then you've always rung the fifth. So how come you've kind of stayed on one bell, given that you're multi-talented, you can ring anywhere?
I think it's because they feel that's where I'm best placed. I mean, I rang over 100 peals on the fifth at Phillips Cathedral, Birmingham, so I got a bit typecast there. So they thought, oh, Fran on the fifth, it sort of rolls off the tongue. And they reckoned that I knew where to start on the fifth for most methods, so there was no chance, even if nerves did kick in, i.e. I hadn't had a chance to go to the pub first, that my arms would ring automatically in the right direction.
I'd like to talk about Birmingham a little bit in a bit more detail. It's for me because I grew up in Coventry, and so a few Birminghams would come across Coventry Cathedral many times. But as an early ringer, I apart from visiting Aston once, we didn't really ring much in and around Birmingham. So it came as a great surprise when I started progressing as a ringer. I thought that goodness me, there was this centre of excellence within striking distance of where I grew up. I'm led to believe that Rod really was highly competitive at times. That's correct, yeah?
Oh my goodness me! Oh yes, absolutely. It was life and death. I mean, blame game afterwards. If you made a mistake, Rod would, and there would be a follow-up meeting after the event to sort of look back. And by goodness, blame was apportioned.
But how do you keep that as a sort of a positive thing? Because everybody's different. I'm not a naturally competitive person, so I have to work really hard to get myself into the headspace of someone who is competitive. I think my first question on that is everybody in the tower competitive?
No. I think we all want to do well. We want to give of our best. But the fact that we prepare so well, we really take the competitions very seriously, and we manage our preparations better than a lot of other teams, which is probably one of the reasons we've won so many. We dissect every bit of it, where we're seen to be struggling with the method, struggling with striking over certain bells, especially after we've been to had our tryout on the bells. That is analysed in minute detail, and we're told how to adjust and practice to adjust to make it that bit perfect for the judges to hear us to the best of our advantage.
So actually, there's a lot of emphasis put on giving you individual feedback to help you as individual ringers.
Oh gosh, yes. Strikeometer has been a big thing for us. Not that I understand it. I'm one of the few who never even looks at the info because it doesn't mean anything to me. My ears tell me how I've run. And, occasionally they say, well, you were sort of how many thousandths of a second fast? I said, oh, well. I don't care. I reckon I'm good enough.
Now, Fran, we know that beer plays an important part in your ringing, but if it was just the beer, then you would be a beer fanatic and probably be heading up Cameron nationally. So why do you keep coming back to Birmingham? What's kept you going over the years?
Well, as I say, teaching ringing. I've seen so many ringers come through. In fact, at least one or two of my people that I taught to ring are themselves in 12 bell squads. And to me, that is the best accolade. Many of them have made peal ringing grade, and I'm very, very proud of that. So I think it's in me. I'm a natural ringing teacher.
Well, a fantastic and fascinating interview there with Fran Dodds. Lots and lots of information. Bit of a legend. Steph, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you,
I mean,
Matthew.
She is a bit of a legend, isn't she?
She is a complete legend. She's a classic. Complete rock of the team, of course. Interesting what she said. She said she depends on her ears, regardless of what Hawkeye says. So, and she's got absolutely great ears. And she does spend a huge amount of time investing, supporting, teaching local ringing, real local ringing. So yeah, she's a grounded girl, that one. When she first started ringing in the competition, it was a different sort of vital statistics that I think were of interest to people. But 24, she's been in all 24 of Birmingham's wins, so that really says something.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing, and it was a real joy. Fran, I know you're watching. It was a real joy talking to you, so thank you for sharing that with all of us here. We really appreciate it. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Now, we are running a competition throughout the show, because you're going to hear lots and lots of history, lots of facts and figures, and there is a question sheet on the 12 Bell website and a prize available. So we know people have already been taking part because you've been asking questions about the questions. Here's a big clue. The answers are all in today's broadcast. We'll make sure that those answers are covered at all times. But if you want to get involved and be in with a chance of winning a cream tea sent to your house as a hamper, it's got stones, jam, cream, a selection of teas in there, and a few other bits and pieces and truffles, then get yourself over to the 12 Bell website, 12bell.org.uk. In fact, we can whet your appetites with not a seagull, as you've just seen on the screen. We might show you a picture of the hamper, but that might come up a bit later. 12bell.org.uk. On that page, David Hull has been very kind to upload the questions for the quiz, and then you email your answers to the quiz before midnight tonight to 12bellstudio@gmail.com. And whilst we're talking of email, you can get in touch on social media. So we're taking messages, and the social media channels that we're using is the 12 Bell social media channel. So it's 12 Bell, National 12 Bell is our thing on Twitter, and you can use the hashtag 12bell if you want to see what other ringers are up to in this weird time, and the food that people are sharing, artwork, all sorts of things coming through. We'll be reading out some of those messages in a little bit. And you can also send us messages on the National 12 Bell Striking page, National 12 Bell Striking Contest page on Facebook. You'll find the link to the broadcast. If you put a comment beneath that broadcast link, then we might read that out on air. Okay, so that's what's coming up. We are absolutely indebted, of course, to Taylor's, Bell Founders and Bell Hangers for supporting our broadcast this year. Without their assistance, it really wouldn't have been possible.
The National 12 Bell broadcast is supported by John Taylor & Co., founders of the world's finest sounding bells. Visit taylorbells.co.uk.
Right, now in that interview you heard Fran referring to a very famous ringer, Rod Pipe. Now Rod sadly is no longer with us, and he passed away a little while ago. But David Pipe, Rod's son, has been really generous with his time and took a time out of his schedule to talk to me about his dad's competitive streak.
Yes, it's fair to say. It's fair to say it probably is, and I think it's fair to say I've inherited that from, and it equally as he got older, it mellowed slightly, but I don't think the competitive streak ever went away, and you could tell that in the ringing room where as a 12 we practiced. Then needed saying he'll back and out of a design and get the best out of the resources that we had, if you like, which was the team. But he did much enjoy it. Didn't like it, and that say, but as he got older, he certainly got and lose part of life as well, and he got to take it a lot better. But I think if you'd have seen him in the early 70s and 80s, you'd have seen a very different Rod from in the later days in the 90s and 2000s. But equally as competitive, but just able to take it in a more mature way, possibly as he got older.
When you've got a competitive person leading a tower, and I'm sure you can identify with this yourself, how do you manage that so that it doesn't become too much of a affront to people? Because not everybody in a band is naturally competitive.
Yeah, and that's indeed one of the challenges. And I think my dad certainly found that a challenge, and I have too. You have to learn that people respond differently. Some people respond very well to the stress of a competition situation, and some people do not cope at all well. And I think again, it's one of these things. As you get older, you tend to realise and who is in which category, and you treat people accordingly. And I think, although perhaps in my dad's early days, he was less good at that. Certainly in his later days, he became more aware, and probably the same is true of me too. That you have to, some people you have to nurse through, whereas some people you can actually be, quite demanding of, and they rise to that situation. So it's all a case of people management, I'm sure, and as we get older, hopefully we get better at that.
Very wise words there from Mr. Pipe Jr. Now, whilst we're on the subject of the family pipe, it is a bit of a ringing dynasty, and so Jake, or John Lovelace, many of you will know him as Jake, has been working on a biography of Rod's brother George Pipe, and this is due to be published later this year. And he contacted me earlier this week, and we had a little chat about what's coming up in the book.
Writing this biography really for me was the opportunity of a lifetime. He wanted it done, and I was very, very happy to do it because I'd just retired. What was particularly attractive about it was the breadth of him. Not only was he a very, very high quality bell ringer, but he'd been to Australia for 7 years as a young man. He'd also been to Washington to actually open the bells in 1964, and that's pretty high powered stuff in those days to fly out there. He was the youngest person to ring a peal of London Major, one of the youngest people to ring a peal on 12, that's Mary Latar, which were a rotten old 12. And he's also a lifelong ringer, really. It's Mary Latar in Ipswich, and did the restoration, etc. in 1976, built a band. And he's had also a lifelong commitment to the church as a lay chaplain. His time in Australia is probably what really established his reputation, because he went out there at 21. He just got married, lived in Melbourne for 6 years, and made a huge difference to Australian ringing. He was a major contributory factor to the formation of the Australian New Zealand Society, ANZAB as it's known. He was also a tremendous artist. You'll find his work all over Suffolk in belfries, and very, very good on watercolour and pen and ink. We had something for our wedding from him. I had something for my first peal, 1000th peal, 2000th peal by him, unsolicited. He has been part of a dynasty of ringers, pipes. Father was a noted ringer. His brother, Roderick Pipe, was a noted ringer. He died far too early. And of course, David's Celia, boys, Henry and Alfie, are trailblazing, of course, really achieving incredible things. Yeah, the book's going to come out in October time, and and it's going to be it's 200 odd pages, and it's got about 100 photographs in it, and it'll be via the Ringing World, and they will be advertising it and selling it, probably for delivery in sort of November time, I would think, in time for Christmas. So it'll be a fantastic Christmas present for a bell ringer, or for someone less established who's looking to learn a little bit more about the history of the exercise.
Interesting stuff. So watch out for that if you'd like to find out more about George Pipe and some of his achievements throughout his year. Thanks to Jake for that interview there. Now, social media going absolutely wild at the moment. Colin Parker says, I'm starting the day early on the homebrew with the National 12 Bell, not the 12 Bell live broadcast. Claire Mitchell says we've got fruitcake and tea in plastic cups for later and have had our 12 Bell bacon butties. You'll be very aware that on 12 Bell final day, one of the first things that are served up at the final events are the fried breakfasts and the barbecues, and often bacon butties feature. We've had hog roast and all sorts over the past few years. Len has decided to make beer tokens to really get in the spirit. I love it. Keep those messages coming in, please. Hashtag 12Bell. Alexander Taft, hello to you as well across the water. He says, I'm here with my morning coffee. Nice work on the broadcast and content. Thank you very much. And thank you to those who've been with us as well. We have had a few connection issues. Skype service did something funny to our connection, so things have stabilised. But very soon, stay with us, because we've got the judging hour coming up, and we'll be talking to Katie Town. I think she's dragged Rob Charles in as well, one of the Leeds ringers, to talk to us as well about their involvement in the 12 Bell contest. But before we do all that, very occasionally through history of the contest, an outsider comes in and takes the competition by storm. And we, through our research, discovered that Martin Huff has a story to share with us.
Right, well, the List Campanile basically started not long after my brother and I learned to ring in the early 80s. We started experimenting by trying to hang things like steel bits ringing, and we ended up with 12 steel buckets. They were quite sort of well known at the time, I suppose. But in 1983, things really kind of took off when we changed these horrible sounding steel buckets for this set of flower pots, which actually were in tune and made quite a pleasant noise. A few years later, that was when we entered the 12 Bell competition. It was 1983 when the flower pots were replaced the buckets, and 1985 actually was the first year we entered the 12 Bell contest, and 1986 was our really successful year. One of the problems we had at the time was people didn't sort of believe, I think, that we actually practiced on these things. But who would take seriously a bunch of people who practiced on a set of flower pots? This was the problem we had. From the sort of, I don't know, late 70s onwards, we used to meet on a Sunday night after evensong ringing had all finished, and we'd ring a quarter peal there, and we had quite a big pool of ringers, came from Surrey, Sussex, Hampshire, and further afield sometimes. But we didn't just practice on them. And certainly, in the run-ups to the competitions, we used to go to whichever 12 Bell towers within reasonable distance that we could get to borrow to have a practice on. The first year we entered was 1985. The eliminator was in Nottingham, the two 12s, St Peter's and St Mary's. We were drawn at St Mary's, and our only thing we tried to do that year was to make sure that we finished in front of Winchester, which we did quite comfortably. The following year was when we entered again. We were in the eliminator at Painswick. Anyway, we won that eliminator quite comfortably, and then we went to Leicester for the final, and we actually came second ahead of some quite prestigious teams at the time. most of the teams were all kind of very well-known towers, and in the W&P at the time, all you had was Winchester Cathedral and Christchurch when it came to rings of 12. I mean, the whole thing's changed now, and like you've got Hursley, you've got Portsmouth, you've got Bitton Park, as well as Newport on the Isle of Wight, where I now live. But back then, unless you were in with one of the big centres of 12 bell ringing, it was much harder to get to go to the 12 bell contest. You needed a 12 bell tower.
Fair point. But what a lovely story. I actually had no idea that had happened. A lovely story there. You need to enter a 12 bell tower, a 12 bell contest. You haven't got your own tower, so you make one. So thank you very much to Martin Huff for sharing that story. Just remind you, we've got the little competition running. We are giving the answers out to the quiz questions that are on the 12 Bell website, and you can be in with a chance of winning a hamper, a cream tea sent to your house. If you want to get involved, go to 12bell.org.uk and download the questions, and then you need to email your answers to those questions to the 12 Bell Studio email address. So it's 12bellstudio@gmail.com. I've had a couple of people asking questions because they've looked at the questions on the sheet and saying, you've asked about Kidderminster, but there's been more than one eliminator at Kidderminster. We know that, but maybe that bit of the show hasn't come up yet. So stay tuned. At the end of the broadcast, as normal on this channel, what will happen is it will get archived. So if you do want to fast forward or rewind, after a few hours, it gets archived, and so you can go back through the show. But the deadline for entries tonight will be midnight, so as long as you get them before then. Right, now on the line, we've got Katie Town and Rob Childs. Hello.
Hello.
Hiya.
Hello, how are you both?
We're doing really well. We're sort of fixating on the idea of cream teas at the moment.
I know. I keep talking about these things and my tummy's rumbling. I had a cheese sandwich just before we came on air, so that's kept me going at the moment. But lovely to see you both. Thank you very much for joining us. Katie, I just wanted to talk to you first. I mean, because you have been a judge. How many times have you been involved in judging the contest?
So I've judged 3 finals and 2 eliminators.
Fabulous.
Actually,
go on.
The first time I judged a final, I'd been eliminated myself, which didn't feel like the most auspicious start to judging.
Oh, so the only way you made it to the final was by transferring to the judging side?
Yes, absolutely. Transferring to the dark side.
Oh, now why do you say the dark side?
A flippant use of phrase, but I mean, I think sometimes it does feel as though you're being in judgment of your fellow ringers, which I don't try to do on a regular basis. So for that reason alone, it feels a little bit like the dark side.
Now, you are sharing a sofa with Rob Childs, who has competed in the contest quite a few times. Rob, what's been your experience of the 12 Bell contest so far? How many times have you competed?
That's a good question, Matthew. I think I've rung in 9 finals. I think that's a bit of a guess, actually. And my first actual exposure to the contest was in 1999 when I followed the Leeds band down to Southwark but didn't actually ring with them. And my first competition ringing was at Leeds in 2000, I think. So quite a long time now.
Fabulous stuff. Well, listen, we're going to be focusing on judging for the next few minutes in the show. Just to get us into the mood of that, Andrew Wilby has got yet another story. It's another Andrew Wilby story. He was commenting on, something to do with the college use. Let's find out what he had to say.
Leicester Cathedral in the early days. Now, college U's were drawn to ring first. Now, in those days, I don't think people believe this so much now, but in those days, before any automated judging or anything, it was pretty well true. If you rang first, the judges were tuning up. They had every fault they could find. As the day wore on, the pencils got blunt. They got less critical, it seemed. And if you rang last, if you rang well and last, you might win. There was a contrary view that they'd wake up for the last touch, and anyway, for most of us with the bar open, we weren't necessarily going to ring our best at the end. Anyway, college youths were drawn first, but the dilemma was David House and various others were on a train that had broken down. Well, it had gone round via Mowbray or somewhere, and they were going to be late. So, with great delight, Chris Kimmett and the Bristol Ringers said they would ring first. They were drawn last. So they said they'd swap with us. So that was agreed. Leicester Cathedral had provided a real ale bar, much like it goes on now. And, well, I think we gave up, really. We enjoyed the bar. And when we staggered up into the belfry, I can remember we were helping each other up onto the boxes. I could see 24 ropes. And we sort of just giggled about it, pulled off last, you know. And anyway, had a good laugh. Going downstairs, sitting on the wall outside was Rod Pipe. And he said to me, "It's yours this year, Andrew. It's yours this year." And I gave him a mouthful of abuse and told him to go away, really, stop being stupid. We went and listened to the results, and lo and behold, we came first. What a triumph. But the trouble is, we've only got vague memories of it now.
Hi, my name is Anna Sherwood, and you are watching Not the 12 Bar Live.
I love the fact that Mr. Wilby there said, trouble is we've only got vague memories of it. Rob Giles and Katie Town, are there 12 bell contests or the ringing contests that you have slightly vague memories of?
I think most 12 bell contests, the memory gets slightly vaguer after the results in general. Oh, apologies, we have a cat.
Oh, you've got
joining.
a visitor. Oh, this is like doing like Zoom calls at work and things, and people's cats and things are coming in. So your cat is now being beamed. You may as well introduce the cat.
So the cat is called Charlie.
Charlie the cat.
She's female Charlie, a bit like Charlie Linford.
Ah, I see. I must say, people are admiring the what's behind you on the wall, your own bell wheel.
Yes, everyone should have a bell wheel, especially if their father has had a bit of a career as a bell wheel maker. So I have one and my sister has one and my parents have one on their wall.
There we go. So, well, you just put an advert out there. You might get some orders coming in. So we had Andrew there talking about the kind of some of the inconsistencies. And consistency is a really important issue, isn't it, Katie?
Yeah, consistency of judging is a really difficult thing to get right. And it's what lots of people, when they start having a go at judging whatever sort of competition, sometimes do struggle with. Now, with the assistance of Hawkeye and the Strikeometer, it is a bit easier for judges, and you can test your own consistency throughout the day because the machine doesn't get tired, and the program doesn't have variations between how sharp its pencil is at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. But managing consistency and managing your energy levels when you're judging, particularly if you're judging 10 teams, is a real issue.
Very good. Okay, well, listen, we're going to talk to one of the most experienced chair of judges, David House. David, I understand from looking at the statistics on the 12 Bell website that you hold the position, this illustrious position of being chief judge more than anyone else.
That's a bit terrifying, isn't it? It seems a long time ago now, too. And it was the third year, I think, if I remember rightly, when the competition moved to Southwark, that I had my first go at judging, along with George Pipe and John Fielden.
Was that easier, or was it a different challenge in comparison to the ringing? I mean, at that time, because it's still quite a young contest, and I'm just trying to get a sense of did you have a feeling that it was something big and that it was going to grow?
No, I don't think we foresaw that. I mean, you're absolutely right. The history of the competition is that it's really developed 12 bell ringing around the country. But at the time of Southwark, I think we had about 6 teams. There were no eliminators in those days. And it didn't feel quite as hard as I think judging now would feel if one didn't have Hawkeye to assist.
Is that because the standards have all increased? And what makes you say that?
Well, I think it's the greater the number of teams, the harder it gets, I think. I think the higher the standards, the more consistent the standard, the the harder it gets. It's pretty rare these days for teams in the final, at least, to have significant method mistakes, say, any really bad ringing. So I think the judges, insofar as they're relying on their ears, have a much harder time than one had back in the late 70s, early 80s, where there were fewer teams, and really only 3 or 4 of the top teams ever really turned in the sparkling performance that we now expect many others to do.
Well, that was David House there. Katie Town, as a judge, I mean, when you look back, if you can imagine not having the strikeometer, would you see your job as being a bit more challenging?
I'm not sure that I'd have actually said yes to doing it without the strikeometer, actually.
Really?
Yeah, the first final that I judged was at Melbourne when the strikeometer was at its really early days, and that was it was tough, and we didn't have any information from the strikeometer throughout the day. We got it all at the end, got all that data just at the end of the day. And that was really challenging, actually. You felt like you were judging in a vacuum, and it was 10 teams. So it was quite challenging as my first 12-bell judging experience. I was judging with Ian Ralston was chief judge that year, and with DD. So I just kind of felt through the day, if my results were mirroring theirs, then I was doing okay. But then I think that's kind of my ethos. I never quite feel that I'm good enough for anything, and it certainly came out that day. But now where you've got the strikeometer live in the room and you're getting feedback, or you can ask for feedback after each touch about how the strikeometer's perceived it, then it is much more of an integral part of the judging process. I certainly don't think I'd have agreed to be a chief judge had I not had that tool to be able to rely on.
Fascinating. So we're talking to Katie Town, who's a very experienced judge of the 12-bell contest, and Rob Childs as well, who has competed in the contest a number of years. Rob, as a competitor, somebody who's taking part in the contest, knowing that the judges have a tool that can help keep consistency, does that help with your kind of confidence in the judgment that they're making?
Personally, Matthew, I mean, I don't pay much attention to strikeometers at all. I just do what I think's right and ring. So it's a great tool for the judges to be able to have, as Katie says, but actually performing the outputs and all the information and things like that, it's hard to take in when you're actually ringing, because you're just thinking, I just need to keep going, don't go wrong, just concentrate as hard as you can. But thinking about numbers or little inconsistencies or little striking errors is really hard. So
you're with Brand odds.
It's difficult.
Well, listen, because you're touching on a very important debate there, particularly straying into the kind of artistic side of ringing, and we'll be hearing from other ringers and some other judges about judging artistically, namely Julia Cater. So just pick up, you may have heard Katie refer to somebody called DD, that's David Durnley, who has also been a very experienced judge. And if you want to find out who's judged the most contests, get yourself along to the 12-bell website, 12bell.org.uk. It's full of statistics, and I have to say, you won't find all of the answers to the quiz on that website. You need to be watching this programme. Okay. So we've heard from David House, we've heard from Katie Town there, who's talking to us at the moment. But another judge who's been involved for quite a number of years is Rick Shawcross, and I had a chat with him. He's been involved in many eliminators and finals.
So that was the eliminator, and it was a pleasant experience. I met a lot of old friends. Of course, I'd moved to Hereford by that time, and as everybody knows, 12-bell ringing is not a regular feature in Herefordshire, probably because we don't have any 12-bell towers. And I'm not sure how much interest they used to get for judging the eliminators, but anyway, I was very, very pleased to be asked. We went along to Southwark and we judged there, and it wasn't too bad. And then he said, well, how do you fancy coming along to the final? We're actually going to St Paul's, and the competition are going there for the first time. Well, who can refuse? One of my favourite Peels bells. I mean, you turned up, you had to take a pencil and a bit of paper, and that was about it. And so there was no great preparation. It was still fairly laid back. Yeah, we just turned up, met in the crypt, and then were taken upstairs I think it was Jack Phillips, to some distant part of the roof space in St Paul's. It's always very interesting to be taken to these faraway places that nobody else ever sees. And we seem to be walking upstairs forever to get to this roof space. In early days, the judges were, how can I put it, extremely well looked after. And Jack had said, I'm going to be the guy who looks after you all day. I'll be at your beck and call, bring you a bit of lunch. Would you like a drink to start off with? Which, most of us thought a cup of tea would be very, very nice. And so we said, yeah, sure. And he said, right, I'll go and get some beer. He said, well, okay, it would have been churlish to refuse. So Jack walks all the way down these stairs again, and 20 minutes or so later appears back with a tray with 6 pints on. He carried 6 pints up all the stairs, and he came in looking pretty knackered, I must admit. And we said, blimey, Jack, what are all these? He said, well, I didn't want to walk up after every piece. So he said, I thought that 2 pints each might last you, and I'll bring the same order up as the day goes by, in between the every second team. And we said, what? Good Lord. No, we said, no, Jack, this is very nice, thank you. We'll wait until the end, and we'll just have a cup of tea at lunchtime. And that was how it was. It was very laid back, and, we worked hard. It was probably not until the mid-90s that I thought that things were really starting to tighten up. I remember on one occasion, somebody from one of the prominent teams who hadn't done very well on the day came up to me and said he thought this competition was getting very unfair because the winners were starting to practice too much. I suppose it was then that I started to realise that some people were taking it very seriously, but not only that, the 12 Bell Committee was starting to take it. They were starting to muck around with the strikeometer, and people were coming up with different ideas. You had to be a little bit more precise in what you said on the roundups afterwards when you were giving out the results. But it had to go that way because people were getting keener.
Is there any difference between judging an eliminator and judging a final?
Well, I think so. The first thing is, I think when I was fairly inexperienced judging, I was more worried about being asked to judge a final than I was to judge an eliminator. But it didn't take me very long to realise that whether you were judging an eliminator or the final, it was generally, and I'm not saying all the time, easy to pick out the best team there. And it was generally fairly easy to pick out who hadn't performed the best out of the whole day. Judging the eliminator, again, we suddenly realised that the first and second were usually fairly easy to get, as were the bottom teams. But you're not really judging the first and second. You're judging between 3 and 4, because 3 teams go through to the final.
Of course.
By the time you get down to 3rd and 4th position, the ringing it's not the best ringing of the day. And good ringing is very easy to judge and pick out the faults. Poor ringing is quite difficult to actually judge. And the teams in 3rd and 4th position, it could be a good team having a bad day. It could be an inexperienced team having a wonderful day. Or it could be just 2 teams not too experienced, sort of struggling to get into the final. And that's difficult. always judging, always finding the third and fourth teams. It makes such a huge difference because one team is out and the other team has gone through to the final, which everybody wants to get into the final. So, no, as time went on, I found the finals far less stressful and the eliminators more stressful as a judge.
Hello, I'm Richard Munnings, and you're watching Not the 12 Bell Live.
Oh, as you can tell, we had a lot of fun going through those idents. Thank you so much if you sent one in. We had a lot of material to go through. Stay tuned. More of those coming up as we go on. Now, just want to say a big thank you to our supporters of today's broadcast, Taylor & Co.
The National 12 Bell broadcast is supported by John Taylor & Co., founders of the world's finest sounding bells. Visit taylorbells.co.uk.
Now, I'm joined at the moment by Rob Childs and Katie Town, both of whom have competed in several eliminators and finals. And Katie has had the auspicious extra duties of having been a judge as well. But Katie, I want to just focus on some of your ringing accomplishments at the final. And one in particular I know will stay in your memory when you were Master of the College Youths.
Yes, in 2015, the final was at Norwich and the College Youth Band won. We drunk rather less than the College Youth team Andrew Wilby was describing earlier on, but I do know that some of the team had, we were drawn second, so I don't think anyone had had a drink that morning, but there were members of the team who had had plenty the night before to make up for it.
What do you remember about that event when you actually heard it was your team that had won the National 12 Bell Contest final?
It was an absolutely brilliant moment. We were stood in this enormous atrium just across the road, just across the square from Mancroft, and I was stood right next to Rob Lee, who'd been running the band for me that year because I decided that he would be far better to get the best out of our band. And we heard the comments about our band and how we'd rung, and those were very favourable. And the results with peel speeds were being done in reverse order, as is the norm at the 12 Bell. And when we got up to the band who had come second, Matt Hilling from Exeter, who stood quite close to me, said, "That's not your peel speed." And I clearly had no idea what our peel speed might be. I'm not that sort of ringer, really. But Matt said, "No, that's not your peel speed." And Rob, Lee and I in that moment had a quick, well, if Matt's right and if we have got this, then what should we do? Should we go up together? Should Rob go up on his own? And we decided at that point that we'd been doing it as a team and we should go up together if we had won, but we didn't think that we would. And then they announced that the College Youths had won, and the whole atrium just erupted into applause. It was really amazing. I think quite a lot of that was that Birmingham had been so dominant for lots of years leading up to that, and people were just delighted to have a bit of a change. But it was a really, really special moment to go and lift that trophy, and also to be lifting it with Rob, because it made 12 Bell is very much about a team effort, and it always seems a little bit odd to me that you have a team captain going up on their own. Ideally, you'd have all 12 people going up. It's all 12 people who have won it. And we certainly did a lot of passing around the trophy, and lots of people in the band had pictures with them lifting the trophy after the results.
Brilliant stuff. Well, yeah, I mean, you can see the smiles on your face on the day will be firmly imprinted in my mind. Like you said, the place absolutely erupted. But we'll come back to Katie and Rob, come back to both of you in a moment. What I want to do now is we've spoken to Simon Rudd, because he was the organiser of the final at Norwich. He kind of headed up the team. Of course, it is a team operation, just as ringing is as well. And they were hosting in the 300th anniversary of the 300th anniversary of the first Peal of Plain Bowl Bob triples on the bells at St Peter's Mancroft, and there's been a wonderful legacy from that event. So here's Simon Rudd with more.
It was the centrepiece of one of our most historic years, really, at St Peter Mancroft in Norwich, because as you'll recall, it was organised and planned quite a few years in advance to coincide with the 300th anniversary celebrations for the famous peal of plain bob triples that was rung in 1715, and coming in June in 2015, it was the centrepiece of our planning for that year. And it was the year that launched Mancroft Appeal 300, which saw us build the Mancroft Ringing Discovery Centre, which has been an exciting adventure really for every year since 2015 when we first launched that project. So it was fantastic to welcome so many people to the heart of Norwich, and you can see the gathering of most of them behind me in my background, which was the results ceremony, which was in the forum, and you can see St Peter Mancroft just over the top of my head. In the background.
Would you do it again?
Yeah, in a heartbeat. Well, I would. In fact, we would very much like the competition to come back to Norwich at some stage in the future, because so much has changed. It's unbelievable the amount of change at St Peter Mancroft since 2015, which is just 5 years ago. We're now ringing from our new gallery, which is 20 feet higher up. The views of the church and outside are amazing now from our new ringing room. And of course, we've got our training centre, Discovery Centre bells downstairs. So it's been a complete transformation to what you would have seen in 2015 to what you'll see now. And we would very much like you to come back and see that and welcome you back to the fine city.
You said it here, people. You heard the request to go back to St Peter Mancroft. I mean, you touched on something very important there, your ringing centre. Tell us a bit more about that.
It's been a massive project for us. It first started really when we began in 2012 and involved some highs and some lows, one of the lows being rejected by the Heritage Lottery Fund the first time round, which caused us a lot of soul searching and whether we would actually go back round the loop again and have another go at getting some funding. Obviously, as you know, we were successful. I think it's the biggest grant that the Heritage Lottery Fund have given for a ringing project. And it's just about coming to completion now. The last few bits of exhibition work were due to be completed on March the 23rd, which was the day that lockdown started. So we're just waiting for our contractor to come back to do final bits for all of the exhibition materials that are going into both the church and the old ringing room. But it's been an amazing adventure for us at St Peter Mancroft. It's been fantastic from the point of view of pulling everybody together in a team activity that isn't ringing. We've been the beneficiaries of some amazing skills, non-ringing skills from people in the guild and the wider area here in what they've brought to the project in terms of being able to do things outside their comfort zone and go that extra mile to help us get that project across the line. And although I'm a little biased, I think the result is, well, it's exceeded my expectations by such a long way that I'm absolutely delighted with what we've got at the moment.
Hello, it's Annabelle and Matt.
And you're watching Not the 12 Bell Live.
Now, come on, that's got to be a first, having cows on the National 12 Bell broadcast, or Not the 12 Bell Live. I must get that title right. So thank you very much to Matt and Annabelle for sending that one in. More to follow. Keep tuned. And don't forget, if you are doing our quiz this afternoon, if you've downloaded the questions from the 12 Bell website, 12bell.org.uk, get your answers in before midnight tonight by email, and you could be in with a chance of winning our prize hamper of a cream tea delivered to your house. Got jam, tea, clotted cream in there. Some truffles as well, and a selection of teas, so lots of stuff there. Now, ringing itself, but also judging, is a very human activity, as we'll hear from Katie Town in a moment. I'll be asking her for some of her particular memories. But judges are human beings, and as you heard Rick Shallcross saying earlier, it can pose a few issues. So we thought we'd ask our judges if they had any particular memorable events that stuck in their minds.
I remember having to the one I judged one at St Martin's in the Field with gosh, I think it was Peter Border and maybe John Fielden at the time. Maybe I was the young female sort of contribution, and I remember that one being quite tough because I was surrounded by these two greats. And also we were in the louvers and the rafters of St Martin's in the Field, and they couldn't actually put seats up there. So we had to sort of perch on these beams and be careful where we couldn't stand up and in case of banging our heads and things. We were in this blooming space for hours. with not much proper ventilation. You could go out onto the outside of the outside of the top of the tower at St Martin's in the Field, which I did once, and I was getting some fresh air, and I just casually looked over the side and saw a load of ringers and thought, oh my god, I'm not supposed to see them. So I had to retreat back into the space and just sit there in this sort of lofty area, dirty, horrible, dark, grimy, hot.
Mentioned at Norwich, Sir Peter Mancroft, we were accommodated in the pub, the Garnet Wolsey, down on the marketplace, place which I didn't know, having lived in Norwich. But the only accommodation available, Anne White, as she now is, and will be at the time, Anne and I were accommodated in a small lavatory in the publican's flat above the pub, and George Pipe was one floor further up in a bedroom. So it wasn't ideal for a judging team.
Near disaster always looks funny, doesn't it? But it must have been very, very worrying for the organisers at Kidderminster.
So this one was Rick Shallcross, Steve Mills and myself.
I was taken around the back of the church, into the churchyard, and they're parked on a little sort of tarmac drive that sort of sloped down a bit towards some gates. Was a camper van. I'd also used to like to ask the organisers, by the way, for a secretary who could do some adding up for us in the middle, in between each test piece. We had this guy who said he would come along and brought it and put it on the shelf at the back of the camper van.
Also, I don't like being able to see other people when I'm judging, because if I see them making a sort of mark with their pen and I haven't, it kind of distracts me from actual pure listening and concentration. So we were all sort of having to shuffle around into different spaces so we couldn't see each other.
And I think Julia fancied, I think Julia sat in one of the front seats, but she had to climb over because the guy wouldn't give us the keys to open the side doors.
And yeah, we had to sort of shuffle around with our little sort of camper seats and things like that to try and get some space.
And I don't know what happened, but somebody knocked the handbrake. Now we didn't know much about camper vans or where handbrakes were, and this camper van started rolling down the hill. In fairness, it didn't roll very far, but it rolled far enough to cause near panic in the van.
And then actually, unbeknownst to us, in one of the shuffles, I forget who it was.
Someone, goodness knows who, must have knocked the on switch of the hob.
One of the other two accidentally knocked the dial on the oven of the sort of little camper oven, and we didn't know, so it just gradually heated up, and there was a pile of papers on, because we were spread out everywhere. There was a pile of papers,
and we must have been in about the fourth or the fifth team.
What's that smell?
When the explosion occurred.
And then we were having this frantic sort of, oh my God, we got to try and move and panic, but still carry on marking.
You can imagine in a confined space, sort of startled us, to say the least. And what had happened is that the guy who was our secretary, who was totting up our judging marks on his computer, had put the computer on the hob, effectively roasted until not only did the computer explode, but so did the hob.
I shouldn't laugh. This is so wrong. I shouldn't laugh.
I know, but This is true. Please check with Julia.
My dear friend Chris Kippin will remember and remind me of frequently was at Guildford when he was judging, and with the college youths, we were somehow left to ring after the judges had decided they wanted a lunch break. So Mr. Kippin and co had their lunch while we hung around, and some of the ringing had been quite slow. Now, some people in those days thought you'd impress judges by ringing slowly. Now, Chris will get very annoyed at this suggestion, but everybody thought he liked slow ringing. It wasn't suiting us, and I was ringing the tenor and just said, come on, let's get a move on. So they took me at the word, and we shot off at a phenomenal speed. Well, Chris said he got indigestion, he had heartburn. We'd completely ruined his lunch with our ringing, and we didn't do very well in the marking.
Hey up, I'm JT, and you're watching Not the 12 Bell Live. Come on!
We got lots of interaction on social media. Just to remind you, if you do want to get involved, it's very easy to do so. You can tweet us at National 12 Bell, or you can use the hashtag, which is hashtag 12 Bell, and you can see what other people are up to as well, what their messages are. But just on the messages, we've actually had a really nice email come in from Nick Elks. He's emailed me in the email address 12bellstudio@gmail.com. And he says, "Hi Matthew, I'm enjoying the show, but missing the social aspect of the usual 12 Bell event. I've attended a few 12 Bell competitions now, and apart from enjoying the whole atmosphere, it has inspired me to ring on 12 myself." I think that's lovely. It's inspiring people, and we've had a few of the the veteran ringers that we've spoken to who've said that they've seen other people get inspired, they've attended the event, and it's spurred them on to take up 12 bell ringing. And that's the point. I mean, what we're trying to do is not necessarily convert everybody to 12 bell ringing, but just to show, share some of the advice that comes out of this major event right down to grassroots level. How can some of this apply to the ringing that you do in your own towers around the country, and even if you're judging a competition? And on that note, I want to bring back Katie Town and Rob Childs, who've been very good to give up some time this afternoon. Rob has been checking the Leeds football schedule to make sure that we weren't going to take time out of a match. So we're not in any dangerous time here, Rob, are we?
No, we're fine. I'm not playing till tomorrow, so that's all right.
Katie, with your judge's hat on, are there any we heard some extraordinary stories there from Rick Shawcross, Julia Cater, there was Andrew Wilby in that video as well, and also David House, talking about all the distractions and issues that they have to contend with. Have you had any mishaps when you've been judging that you are able to share?
It's nice to hear from all those ringing legends about the mishaps that they've encountered. I'm being very lucky to not have anything quite as bad as that. I did judge an eliminator at St Margaret's, Leicester, where we were located in a caravan outside.
Oh, so you've had a caravan type experience?
I have had a caravan type experience. We discovered early on in the day that the toilet facilities that we'd been promised were non-existent, which was an interesting problem. But we also had some technical glitches during the day, which resulted in us having to open the caravan door to listen to one team live when we'd been aiming to listen through a live feed. But luckily, no fires and no having to move around in the caravan. I was judging that one with the brilliant Steph Passenden. And if there's anyone who you can ever need to face adversity with, I think someone as knowledgeable, as kind and as generous as Steph is definitely the right person to have to face that with.
There we go, and I'm sure there will be more stories, but let's hope that there aren't too many detrimental stories for any future competitions that you go on to judge. Now, the judging, we're talking a lot about striking. We'll be talking in a bit more detail about the strikeometer a little bit later in our final hour of the show. But one of the other questions that comes up every now and then is how much does artistic impression play a part when it comes to judging? Because if you make an artistic judgment on something, it's quite subjective. It's down to the individual. We heard some ringers earlier, talking about there may be a preference amongst some judges to prefer more steady ringing. Some people like pacey ringing. I've seen the same on handbells and different tower captains taking over ringing. They're putting their own sort of artistic mark on it. So one of the questions I asked Julia Cater is how much artistic impression she takes into account.
I remember having to the one I judged one at St Martin's in the Field with I think it was Peter Border and maybe John Fielden at the time. Maybe I was the young female sort of contribution, and I remember that one being quite tough because I was surrounded by these two greats, and also we were in the louvers and the rafters of St Martin's in the Field, and they couldn't actually put seats up there. So we had to sort of perch on these beams and be careful where we couldn't stand up and in case of banging our heads and things. We were in this blooming space for hours with not much proper ventilation. You could go out onto the outside of the outside of the top of the tower at St Martin's in the Field, which I did once, and I was getting some fresh.
Oh, that was the wrong button we pressed there, so we'll try and get you the right one. This is Julia Cater. I asked her about artistic ringing, and I actually opened by asking a question, if judging makes you a better ringer.
It's quite an interesting topic, actually, because I've judged competitions in a number of different ways. Some of them have been fault scoring in the sort of traditional way, but I have also utilised judging techniques around sort of impression marking, where you are not scoring each row fault by fault. You're either standing back and just having a sort of an artistic impression, and you have to have some criteria about what that means for the whole piece. But for the Ringing World National Youth Competition, where we had 24 or something like that teams that we were having to judge, I designed in collaboration with other people, but I designed a system where you're doing very structured but impression-based marking, and that was because we just could not judge fault marking for 24 teams from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening. It would have been physically impossible. So you don't have to do it purely just on faults and accuracy. Being able to judge around impression has its place in a number of settings. And I remember once, probably in my 20s, Rod Parpast set up a competition as an experiment, and basically pitched off impression marking against fault marking in, I think it was a 12 bell, and ringing on 12, and he asked me to be one of the impression judges, just so that if we basically placed I think there were 3 or 4 different, they weren't teams, they were just 3 and 4 bands that he'd assembled from Birmingham, to see if they put them in the same hierarchy, and of course we did. So I think that it's a big debate, isn't it, about fault marking and how much role impression has. I come at bell ringing very much from music rather than from computers or maths, and they're not my strengths. But I definitely feel ringing, and I feel the colour. I hear the colour, if you like, when I'm listening to ringing. I definitely come at things from a musicality point of view. I'm forever in any band where I can have any influence. I'm forever talking about, don't forget what's the person outside hearing, and for me it's all about what the person outside is hearing, whether that's shoppers on a Saturday morning or people that we're calling to worship on a Sunday. But for me it's all about what it sounds like.
Hi, I'm Linda Huntington from Richmond, Virginia, USA, and you're watching Not the 12 Bell Live.
The National 12 Bell broadcast is supported by John Taylor & Co., the Loughborough Bell Foundry. Visit taylorbells.co.uk.
fascinating to hear Julia's take on that artistic impression judging. Katie Town, when you're judging, I know you have a sort of a link to performing arts professionally. I mean, does that artistic impression inform your judgment, or are you able to go purely on the kind of timing, or are the two intrinsically linked?
I think they're intrinsically linked, aren't they? Because it's all about listening, and we are, by our nature, we are swayed by our own preferences to an extent. The way that the 12 Bell's been marked in recent years when I've been involved, we've been relying on the strikeometer to be collecting the data and to be giving the score of a team. Instead, unlike Julia, I've actually been listening to each row and making a judgment call on each row. But when I first judged it involved putting a number at the end of the row, and now when I've judged it in later years, it's involved annotating that row to show where things are going particularly well or where things are going particularly badly. And at the end of the touch, you look at the piece of paper and you can see the patches of really good ringing and the patches of less good ringing. So in effect, that does have an artistic judgment as part of it, but you're just trying to keep a consistent artistic judgment where a clip, a clash or a blang are always consistently defined throughout.
Yeah, sure. And I take your point. You mentioned about annotating there. We'll have some tips in a moment from experienced judges on how they go about marking the score sheet. So if you're perhaps going to be or considering learning the craft of judging a striking contest, or you think it could be on the horizon in the next few years, then keep listening and keep watching, because there are some valuable tips that will be coming out. I just want to move on to the feedback though, because once you've done all this annotation, then you have to give some kind of feedback to the teams. And Rob, as a competitor, how useful is that feedback? Do you listen to that, or do you do? I'm going to be really honest here. I kind of, if I'm competing, I don't really pay much attention to that. I want to just know the results.
Well, it's definitely, Matthew. I mean, going into the church hall or wherever the results have been given at the end of the day, I think is one of the highlights of the day, to be honest. And if you don't listen, it's probably not even worth going in, is it? I mean, you've got to try and take on board where you can go in the piece of ringing, if you've done something particularly wrong or something's particularly good, or bells aren't working well together. And if you can take that information on board, take it back to your home tower, to your practices, and think, this is what they said, this is what we need to do, and surely it's got to be helpful.
Yes, indeed. Go, sorry, Katie.
Yeah, it's good to hear. As a judge, I've always spent quite a lot of time trying to craft those comments and trying to make sure that they are something that's got a useful takeaway for each band wherever they've been placed in the order of results. So it would be kind of heartbreaking to find out that people weren't listening too much. There's always those people who do stay in the beer tent, and as a judge you know there's going to be a few of those, but most people come to results, and I think most people listen to what the comments are.
I do listen to the comments on this, but I think what it is, I think when you've got that intensity of the day, there is a bit of you anticipating the results. I spoke to Tom Hinks last week, and we'll be hearing a little bit from him in a bit, and he was saying that a large proportion of that deliberation time at the end of the day is spent crafting the comments. By that stage, the judges are fairly clear on who's won, and they've got the order, but it's giving some constructive feedback. I mean, is that a particular challenge, trying to find something that is constructive?
Finding something that's constructive is always really important, but actually when you've got three sensible, experienced judges in the room, you can have a discussion about what piece of ringing you've just listened to. Normally you craft a few comments immediately after the piece, with your instinctive thoughts just immediately afterwards, and then at the end of the day come back to think what will be helpful, what will explain both our order, but will also be something that's constructive to give back to that band to work on.
Great bit of advice there. Well, listen, Katie Town and Rob Childs, we shall let you carry on with your afternoon and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you so much for talking to us. I know your comments are very much appreciated, looking at some of the comments coming in here. So have a great day, and thanks for talking to us.
Will do. Thank you.
Katie Town and Rob Childs there. Now, Katie was just talking about the importance of that constructive feedback, but not everybody gets it right first time, and we have to learn that. And some people learn from their mistakes. Now, David, a little bit has tipped me off that tiddlywinks featured in your feedback. Can you tell us more?
Yes, it was my first experience of judging, and I think it was the third year of the contest at Southwark. In those days, there were no eliminators, so everybody who entered had able to be accommodated in the final. The bells at Southwark, of course, quite tough. And I was judging, I think, if I remember rightly, with George Pipe and John Fielden. And the London County started their touch. And I think they struggled a bit with the might of the bells, even though they were almost the local team before Southwark developed his own band with quite such strength. Anyway, they got into the second course of the Touch of Stedman Sinks, quite a standard course, I remember, 2 single 13, single 15, and they survived until about the single at 13, and then something had gone wrong. I suspect that one of the bells at the back made a bob rather than a single. Anyway, they fundamentally had half a course of firing, and that raised a real problem, I think, for the judges. What do you say when half a course of firing comes to an end? I do recall we played the tape back just to be sure, and there were exactly the right number of rows. And at the right time, it came beautifully into rounds, but from half course firing. And I'm afraid I said, in having been charged with giving the remarks rather than the easy job of dishing out the results, which chief judges usually keep themselves, I said, well, team number X might just as well have been playing tiddlywinks. It caused quite a laugh. I think Southwark was the first of those occasions where there was quite a lot of beer around. So the audience was in quite fine form. All I could hear, having said that, was Harold Rogers, bless his memory, saying, "What's he say? What's he say?" cupping his ear, and Olive forever afterwards called me that dreadful David House. And I think after that, the committee very wisely gave judges advice on how to give feedback when things hadn't gone too well. If I'm honest, I can't remember any teams since then falling into quite that difficulty. So it was a bit of a challenge.
Hello, I'm Blahaj, the University of Bristol Society mascot, and you're watching Not the 12 Bell Live. Blub, blub, blub. Swim, swim, swim.
Well, speaking of challenges, Adam Brady has been in touch on Twitter. He says, I've also judged a striking contest from a caravan, but never realised how dangerous it can be. Reference there to Julia Cater and Rick Shawcross's experiences at Kidderminster a little bit earlier in the show. Now, we did promise you some judging tips, so we've gathered some very experienced judges together, and they've all got different approaches. But if you are thinking about judging a striking competition and wanting to know where to start, here are our top tips.
Do your homework first. Try and listen to some ringing of which is going to be similar to what you're going to hear.
So I suppose this applies to virtually any competition. It could be, your local district 6-bell type of thing. If you know in advance that everyone's ringing a set touch, then it's really helpful to have the paper laid out with the right number of boxes on it, so that you can keep sort of marking your way through. I tend to have sort of a whole lead swath on run one row and move on to the next lead and so on. If it doesn't matter what people are ringing, then I just used squared paper, and make sure you've got lots of different sort of pens and things like that, and something to lean on.
If they're having to rely on their ears and not a sound feed, as this tends to be the case with the competition these days, then actually a prior visit and wandering around trying to find a place where you can hear all bells clearly is really absolutely essential.
Turn up, find the guy in charge on the day, introduce yourself, insist immediately on having a look at the judging position, and make sure that that it's okay.
And a place where you're not preferably going to be distracted. I mean, I do recall ringing in the competition at Reading in the earlier years, when during our piece of ringing, the colleges, Concord came over twice. And the judges admitted, I think, that sound was totally obliterated for a bit.
But I think the most important thing when you're preparing to judge a competition is to have your criteria of what your scores are going to be, and to have thought through that, and to have actually practiced your criteria. You know, so are you going to use a 3-point scale, a 4-point scale? Are you going to mark half faults or one fault or whatever? And actually bearing in mind that writing half is 3 pen strokes, and you've got like a second and a bit to do that.
Shutting your mind to everything else. Don't get distracted.
I have an ink pen that makes a mark just by placing it on the paper, and if it's a clean lead, I put a clean row, I put a dot, and then I make a mark in one direction for 1 fault, for 2 faults, or 3 faults. So that tends to be my criteria, is 0, 1, 2, or 3.
I think after each piece, reflecting very carefully, writing some notes to oneself about the things you remember about it. Trying, for my part, I mean, this is not a rule for others necessarily, at the end of every piece, trying to actually put the teams so far into rank order, so you've got some idea of how things are progressing.
Something that worked really well last year at Exeter was that Jenny was typing our sort of initial comments up as we were talking about the teams as they rang, so that sped up the process of writing the final comments quite a bit.
And be kind to everybody who's in the competition, because generally they've all practiced hard just to get there.
Crafting that feedback, and I don't know whether we always get it right, but crafting that feedback which is helpful, kind, so not picking out individual bells necessarily, not being really horrible to a team.
They might be ringing rounds and call changes, Bob minor or Cambridge minor. It doesn't really matter. Just be kind when you're summing up the results afterwards.
A comment like the leading in this piece was awful obviously isn't kind and doesn't really give them anything. It's not very specific in terms of what to do next. Whereas saying, paying particular attention to the handstroke gap in the leading or something like that, or when coming off the lead, I think is fair and is a helpful thing to say. Being kind, being specific, giving something to work on, and talking about the things that were good. There'll be something that you can identify in a piece of ringing that was really good wherever they've come in the ranking, hopefully, and so that's, I think, important as well.
Hi, I'm Sue, and I'm watching Not the 12 Bell Live.
Well, a quick look at messages coming in. Cecilia Piper's been in touch. She says, we're watching the Not the 12 Bell Live and enjoying a gin. Very good. David Piper's got dressed inappropriately. I've just read that. He's got one of his bright shirts on. If you've watched our studio webcams in previous years when we've been doing our broadcast, David is well known for wearing rather bright and exuberant shirts. And I think we may be seeing him again a little bit later in the show, so stay tuned for that. I won't reveal too much, but I know there is something standing by. Looking at the Twitter feed with a hashtag as well, hashtag 12bell, if you're talking to people there. Vicky Romagoo says, I'm watching wearing the 12 bell shirt. Who else is watching? We've got Dave Jones is watching online. Paul in Bath, who's not in Bath at the moment. He says, I've never had any issues being consistent judging. I have never had any issues being a consistent judge. I consistently guessed correctly. He said, I'm enjoying the broadcast from DC, Washington, with George as well. So they're watching there. And who else? We've got Alistair Cherry says, great to see so many familiar faces. Today, really missing ringing a lot today. Yes, I know we all are, but we're doing our best to try and keep the spirits up and talk about some of the great things that we've achieved so far. And remember, this will continue. Just might take us a little bit of time to get there. And we've got some tips on coping with the lack of tower bell ringing in our final hour of the show. So well, we're moving a bit more up to date now because we've had our tips from the judges. We looked at how the contest started. But since 2011, the final at Leeds, the strikeometer has been used a lot in the contest to assist the judges. We've already heard some people alluding to that already. And it's something that we've discussed a lot. It did when it first started to become developed. It was causing a little bit of head turning, possible controversy. There was that fear that as a human judge, could you be replaced, or could you be competing against a machine, and then your own judging may be questioned, called into question. Of course, judges, we know the judges use it as a tool, and at the end of the day, they have the mandate to make a human judgment. But a key requirement of the strikeometer is a very stable and good quality audio feed, because it's all fed into computers that analyse the audio coming from the bell chamber. And this is where our friend David Richards comes in, who we'll hear from in a moment. But I do actually have to pay tribute and a big thank you to that. Over the years, several people have been involved in providing that sound feed. In fact, recordings of the bells have been made at the finals since those Strike 12 tapes of 1978 that we heard mentioned earlier. But Adrian Udall and Derek Carr have been particularly instrumental in providing the technology and lots and lots of cables at these events, both the eliminators and the finals. Now, the broadcast team has worked over the years with David Richards to help bring the pictures and the sound to you, the viewer who has been watching all of our broadcasts over the years. But Dave is a bit of an enigma. He can be invisible at a lot of the events because much of his work is done behind the scenes. So I thought, well, without the pressure of an actual live final taking place this year, I asked him, what exactly does he do?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of different things, and it depends on the whether you're at an eliminator or a final. For the eliminators, it tends to be quite a simple setup of just having a microphone in the belfry, a cable down to the ringing room or the judges, depending on whether you're supporting the practices or the contest day itself. For the final, as I'm sure people are aware, there's a lot more goes on, and we're trying to support all of that, plus the fantastic broadcast as well. So it's basically a lot of cables. Is the answer.
It's not always easy, though, is it? There's some big challenges. Are there particular venues that stick out in your memory?
It's interesting that I think 2015 Peter Mancroft, that was definitely that was the year I started looking after the strikeometer for the 12 bell contest. And I was just amazed at how much cable that we put in. It was nearly 200 metres of cable from the top of the belfry down to the judging room, which was underneath the altar in a small room there. And it was I wasn't prepared for it. Then, of course, last year at Exeter, we completely blew that out of the water. And I think overall we laid just a shade over a kilometre of cable. Just for purposes of audio and video feeds variously around the church.
But I guess with a job like that, you are in a privileged position because you're getting to go really behind the scenes of great buildings and cathedrals.
Oh, unbelievable. And this would be my big pitch to anyone who's considering ringing and thinking, what might be in it for me? And it is exactly what you've just described, that we had the fantastic privilege, and especially at an unfamiliar church like we went to Exeter and we've been to Southwark and lots of iconic places, and you get the full access. You get to go absolutely into areas where not even ringers normally go, and it's just amazing. And some places you're convinced that maybe nobody's been for several hundred years.
Okay, so it's a very critical thing, though, isn't it, placing the microphone, because certainly for the contest, it's being used by the judges. We're using it for the broadcast. Is it a straightforward job?
In terms of microphone placement for the contest, what we're looking for in particular is a good judging feed. It needs to be something that judges can listen to all day without getting tired, but still be able to hear the bells clearly.
So when you're moving a microphone around in the tower trying to find that best position, what issues are you trying to overcome? Are there any extraneous sounds you're trying to avoid?
Oh, absolutely. And it'll amaze you. And It's exactly the kind of thing. If you listen critically, by which I mean listening to the detail of the sound that's coming into your ears. One of the things about listening experience is it's very easy to convince yourself, this is just bells and they sound lovely. A frequent issue that we encounter in the belfry is that you might actually directly hear the clapper striking the bell in some positions, and that's undesirable in general. And you might get a bit of rope noise in some places, or you might get an echo or a reflection off another object.
So, David, top tips then. If I want to record the bells in my home tower, what do I need to do?
Well, I think it depends on the purpose of the recording. I think if you want a general recording to listen to, for example, to go with a promotional video or to go with the church service, then look for somewhere outside where you can hear the bells clearly. I think that's a great way of sort of capturing the overall soundscape and the sound landscape of your bells in their context. But again, do listen critically. Try to find somewhere that really speaks to you to say, this is what my bells sound like. So I think there's another aspect, which is that if you want to record bells for a more analytical purpose, so for example, if you wanted to get detailed feedback on striking, then going directly into the belfry is a good plan. And that's where you'll get the most direct feedback from the bells. Sighting the microphone high above the bells and quite centrally is the best way. We always go for as high as possible. 3 meters is the target. Obviously, it's not possible in all towers. And obviously, if you can get higher than that, then it tends to be better because you get a better mix of the bells without too much multipass reflection. You can get reflection off the inside of the tower.
Hello, I'm Simon Linford, and I'm watching Not the 12 Bell Live.
Dad, you haven't put your trousers on.
Oh no.
Saying nothing. Thank you very much, Simon Linford, for that ident. And some great tips there from Dave Richards as well. Just catching up with some Facebook messages whilst that was playing out. I had a really nice message from Zoe Williams, who has messaged us on the event page. She said, I went to my first 12 bell practice today, thanks to Ringing Room. And she says, thanks for the inspiration. Glad to be of service. What else have we got? We've got Jack's Handbells watching Not the 12 Bell Live with my new owner. Picture there of me on a laptop next to a box of handbells and an inflatable something. Some handbells Ben Keating commissioned. Oh, James Cacaldi says that Ben Keating commission is sitting on the wall. That was a picture of Exeter Cathedral as well. Thank you so much for all of you who are sending messages in. Do keep those coming. We're on you can find us on Facebook, National 12 Bell Striking Contest. You can find us there. You can send us a message there, or you can find us on Twitter. We are National 12 Bell. National 12 Bell is our handle on Twitter. I should know that, shouldn't I? And our hashtag for today is hashtag 12 Bell. I can hear my studio gallery going absolutely crazy in the background. Right. Okay, so we've talked about the wiring for the strikometer. What actually goes on inside the box, though? Now, I caught up with Richard Grimmett, who's been involved in a lot of the development, and it is a team development. I must stress this, but Richard was really kind. We spent a long time talking about the technicalities a bit, and we think we've got it in layman's terms. Pay attention.
When we started the project, we didn't know how to model the ideal strike positions of the bells. I mean, obviously, the transcription process gives us precise information about when each bell struck, but we couldn't work out when a bell should have struck. So 3 different modelers looked at this approach, looked at this and came up with 3 different approaches. Duncan McBurney came up with one which was a line of best fit, where he would effectively plot the strikes as they occurred and then look for the line of best fit in graphical terms to see where the bell should have struck. He refined that further by making sure that the line that he created wasn't corrupted entirely by very bad blows. So he would take the outliers and discard those and then fit the line to the remaining strikes, and then measure the distance between the line and the strikes to determine whether a bell was quick or slow.
Then we had Rob Pipe's statistical method, where he measured the distance between the centre of each whole pool. So he would look at the groupings of 24 strikes and determine exactly where the centre point of that was, and then determine the centre point of the next 24. This is 24 being 12 bell ringing, being whole pools. And from that, he would determine the length of each whole pool, and he would separately calculate over the whole touch the proportion of time that had been spent on the handstroke lead against the length of the whole pool. And then he would be able to work out the exact distance between each strike that was ideal in each row.
Okay, so let me just recap that. So the first model was almost like plotting points on a graph, if we can think of this analogy, and then plotting a line of best fit, and then essentially seeing how far each of the points are away from that line of best fit.
That's correct, Matt.
And then the second one is about taking a sort of an average and working out where each bell should be striking. So you take the 24 blows, the handstrokes and the backstrokes, work out what that distance between bells should be based on all of your data points, your strike points so far, and from that you can work out how far out a bell is.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, great, I'm understanding this so far. So there's a third model, isn't there?
The third method is the one that's used today, and it's based on an engineering algorithm or a filter called a Kalman filter. And a Kalman filter is far too difficult for me to explain, and in fact not really possible because I don't fully understand it myself. But suffice it to say, it comes from the early days of NASA, where instruments on dashboards tended to be the old analog ones with fingers moving around rather than the digital ones we're used to now. And when engineers needed to take readings, these fingers would be moving around a little bit on the dial, and consequently they'd have to take several readings. And from taking several readings, a Kalman filter enables them to determine with a great degree of accuracy what the real reading actually is.
I think that's so cool. You're actually using technology that's been used in space with the strikeometer.
That's correct. And Stuart Flockton introduced the Kalman filter to this and developed a model such that after a few changes, the Kalman filter can predict where the next blow should be and then measure against that. So we set up a number of experiments, and so we set all the three models against each other. And during this, we discovered really that all three models were concurring, except the Kalman one was more accurate. It's moved on a lot since its original days. First of all, we used to have quite a lot of people present at every venue where we operated it, because we needed to make sure that we got backups for recording. We didn't trust the quality of the recorders or the connections or the cables. We had a bank of people with laptops where transcription would take place. Then the models would be running on, each modeler would have their own laptop there and would be running against it, such that there could be some checking between them. We needed to run it in live environment to make sure that the models were reliable. Nowadays, it sits on a laptop and it goes quite happily in the corner of a ringing chamber. It's installed in many towers for practices, and it's generating results in very, very quick time. It doesn't require any special technology anymore.
What format is the output from it? Because we've talked to some judges and they say it can generate loads and loads of statistics and data, and some people are really thirsty for that kind of thing. But me as a ringer, I guess I'd be asking, if I've done I've rung a touch with my band, what's it going to give me? How can I make use of that?
Well, my experience is that we have ringers who are interested in looking, and we have ringers that have no interest in looking whatsoever. And when I ran the Birmingham 12 bell team, I knew which ringers would look and which ones wouldn't. I'd asked them all to have a look at the output from the strikeometer from our practice visit to the tower before the final each year. But I kind of knew that there were probably 6 ringers that would have a look and 6 ringers that wouldn't. So I'd always make sure that I had a phone call with each of those that I didn't think would look during the week to ask them what they'd picked up from the strikeometer, and then explain to them perhaps what they would have picked up if they'd looked, or explain to them if they had looked and they missed something, what it was that they missed.
The National 12 Bell broadcast is supported by John Taylor & Co., founders of the world's finest sounding bells. Visit taylorbells.co.uk.
Hello, I'm Sam Austin, and you're watching Not the 12 Bell Live. Nice.
They're brilliant, aren't they? Yes. Thank you to Sam there, for Sam Austin, for sending that one in. I had a message actually from Annabelle Frost earlier. She was featured with Matt standing in front of the cows on their ident, and they said, "Yay, you used it. Egbert will be pleased." Brackets, that was the moo cow standing nearest to us. So, hello, Egbert. We've seen it all here on this broadcast. Anything could happen next. We are completely live from Bristol. We're not in Sheffield, and we're all in different locations. And my technical team are being pushed to the hilt, and they're all in separate locations as well. So we've got cables, various VPN connections and things going on, all sorts behind the scenes. So big thank you to Gareth Lawson and to Matt Thusey, who are doing the technical stuff, and for Rob Convey, who is keeping me company here and providing me with lots and lots of refreshments and lining up our guests as well. There's our technical team. Look, there's Matt Thusey, live image from his bunker where he's doing all of the technical stuff and managing social media and monitoring our live stream. And there's Gareth Lawson, my trusty producer. Okay, and he's managing a smile as well. That's good to see. So, we were talking about the strikeometer. We've heard about the modelling. So we've got the sound and we've got the modelling. But then what does it spew out? Fran Dodds earlier said that she doesn't understand all of the output of a strikeometer. Richard Grimmett acknowledges that it's not for everybody, but the judges need to be able to interpret that. So if you heard last year's broadcast, you'll remember that we had an interview with Jenny Iris, who was one of the judges. I think she was heading up the judging. And she explained in really helpful terms how they use the output from the strikeometer to help them with their judging.
It's a hugely useful tool for the judges because it gives you an independent point of reference. I'd also say that there is no strikeometer score. It's not like we just look at one score that comes out. There are various different measures and metrics for each team. Those measures and metrics could rank the teams in different.
We've got new ringers listening, and it's just trying to explain to them what it churns out, because it basically spits out lots of data for you, doesn't it?
Yes. So so the strikeometer does two things. So there's two things that need to be done within the sort of strikeometer or hawk here. So you have the sound of the bells, and the first thing you need to do is take the sound of the bells and translate it into data, so numbers which represent the time at which each of those rang. But then you need to apply a calculation to those numbers, which aims to measure how sort of good, for what better word, the striking is. And things you can do, you can look at the standard deviation of those, or you could look at some... And
for people that don't understand what you mean by standard deviation, this is really important, because there'll be people that don't understand what you mean by that.
Yeah, so it's a measure of the overall difference from the nominal perfect position. So the first thing that these metrics or models do is work out what the perfect position is, and the second thing they need to do is work out the difference from that perfect position. So the beauty of ringing is there is no clear agreed definition of the perfect position. So the first challenge is, where's the perfect position? We have lots of views of that, and then there are different ways of measuring how far each team is from that perfect position. So you can measure how far every single individual bell is, and do a calculation, add that together, that's the standard deviation. Or you can say, well, actually, we'll only hear a difference from that perfect position for each bell if it's more than a certain amount.
So there's like a threshold at which the human ear can pick up.
Exactly, and that's like counting faults. So that's what you would, that's the traditional counting faults. So you could say count the number of errors over a certain amount, over a certain size within the whole touch. So
without getting into too much detail, can I push you? What would you consider that time difference to be? That time variation, is it, have we got that information? Has it been collected?
So there are lots of views on that. What we use, because it's what's available, and I've had lots of discussions with Dave, is errors over 50 milliseconds, and that's what people will have seen in their output from their practices and things as well, is my understanding. My understanding of what the human ear can actually hear, and I'm sure people have different views, is about 20 milliseconds. That's my understanding.
That's a figure I've heard.
Yeah, so...
I was just curious where that information came from.
But it would make no sense to count faults over 20 milliseconds, because you'd just be counting nearly all blows. So what you're actually thinking is what
everything's wrong.
Yeah, what is so my perfect. So I'm an actuary, so I like data and I like spreadsheets and I like seeing what comes out of those. My perfect world would be you can choose what your error is and you can very easily see how that varies. There's no time to do that in this competition, and we just have to absorb a lot of information very quickly, come to a broad view. But ultimately, we have as humans been given the mandate to judge, and we have to be able to judge on top of the data that we're given as well.
Hi, I'm Martin Huff, and you're watching Not the 12 Bell Live. I'm the only person in the country who's going to strike 12 bells today. See?
Priceless there. Really enjoying the idents. Thank you again to everyone who submitted them. We had far too many than we could actually play, but we have picked the best ones. We very much enjoyed doing that as well. Still keep the messages coming in as well. Email is quite busy. Message from David Richard. He said, could you put in a plug for Katie Town's judging video? Can I judge a striking competition? That is available on YouTube. Now, I've watched some bits of that, some highlights of that, and it is well worth watching. So if you want more in-depth conversation, hints and tips about how to judge a striking contest, very worthwhile checking that out. So just search on YouTube for how can I judge a striking competition. Very good. Also got some messages coming in. Some Peter Mancroft sent us a very nice message there. Great to be featured in Not to the 12 Bell Live broadcast. Great to hear about the last time we hosted the competition. Also got Simon Bond. He says, I'm enjoying Not to the 12 Bell Live from my garden in Oxford. He sent a picture in there. And we've also got... Not the 12 Bell Live is interesting viewing, but from the same perspective as when I watched the London Marathon. Appreciative of the greatness on display, but understand that it's a completely different league to my experience. Absolutely. But we are doing our best to bring you those stories. So we've been talking about the judging, and that's one aspect of putting on this extraordinary competition. Behind it, there is an organising committee, and I'm very pleased that we've got Mark Bell, the contest chairman, and Hayley Barnett, the contest secretary, talking to us. They're on the line at the moment. Good afternoon to you both.
Matthew.
Hello, we can see you as well, and I believe we've got Mark as well.
Hi, Matthew. Yes, I'm here.
Lovely to see you and hear you, and great shirt as well. I feel you're all showing me up because I've got a dull shirt on. I should have put a brighter shirt on. For people who aren't very familiar with the organisation, Mark, as chairperson, is it simply chairing meetings, or are there other responsibilities that you have?
Yeah, that's just one aspect of it, chairing the meetings that we have 3 times a year in September, December and June. What most of the work actually goes on behind the scenes, probably as in most organisations. So Hayley and I work together throughout the year to do everything that's involved in putting on the contest.
And Hayley, your role to support Mark, is it mainly a supportive role, or are there particular challenges that you have to encounter?
Yeah, I support Mark, and I support the work of the committee, which Steph mentioned in the first hour is made up of representatives from bands that entered the contest in the previous year. And I do a lot of liaison work between the committee and the teams who enter, and also with the local organizing committees. So at each venue, there are people who are organizing the event, and I do a lot of work with them.
Well, brilliant. We'll stay there, both of you, because we're going to come back to you and talk about that organisation, including some of the decisions that have to be made behind the scenes. But first of all, why don't you just talk and hear from some of the younger ringers that have taken part, and indeed who would have been taking part in the contest. So what is that young ringer perspective? Let's hear now from Henry and Alfie Pipe, Emily Hall and Jack Page.
It's quite nerve wracking, really, to be honest. And there's quite a lot of nerves knowing that you're young and it's your first 12 bell and a bit of pressure to ring well and everything. So, but it's fun overall. So.
I can say is that everyone's been in that situation. Every single ringer in that has had that experience before, and I still have it. And I forget sometimes that these days I'm probably experienced tower, but a.
There we are. If your video was getting a little bit jerky there, we just got a few issues with that. Whenever we get anybody on Skype, it seems to consume all of our connection speed. Not quite sure why that's happening. But Hayley and Mark Bell and Hayley Barnett are still with us, but we might not be able to show pictures for the moment. But both of you have been involved in the contest on and off for quite a few years now. You must have seen some changes in that time.
Yeah, I think there have been a number of changes. I think one that's been talked about a lot has been the involvement of the strikeometer, and that's required a lot of help from the technical side of things, and the same with the broadcast, which has come on stream in recent years. I think as a whole, the contest has expanded, and we've seen that through people talking about the early years of the contest, and it was pretty much just people turn up and ring, and now it's an involvement that requires year-round organisation, a committee, and looking forward into the future. We're already thinking about the next 2 or 3 years of the contest and how that might be put on.
Now, obviously, this year's been extraordinary. Looking ahead to the next few years, I mean, how far have those decisions been made, or have you got some meetings coming up where you're going to be discussing those?
We've got a meeting after this broadcast finishes today. So normally the committee meets after the results at the final. So instead of meeting after the results, we're meeting after this meeting. And the committee's made some decisions about the next couple of years. And then there'll be more made into the future. But with the situation with the pandemic, it's hard to know, when we're going to be able to ring again at all, as you know.
So will we be able to say with any confidence, we will be saying where the contest is next year, but maybe wait and see about the following year?
Yeah, we have our schedule for next year. If I can give a plug for the dates, the eliminators will be the 27th of March, 2021 at Bury St Edmunds, Portsmouth Cathedral, and Cornhill, subject to confirmation. And then the finals on the 26th of June, 2021 at Guildford.
Fantastic. And as ever, we can always point people towards the 12 Bell website. If you want to confirm any of those dates and locations, check out 12bell.org.uk, which is also where you can find our competition questions for the broadcast today. Hayley and Mark, thank you. Stay there. We will come back to you because I want to just reflect on the things that I've seen before we hear from Paul Pascoe, who was one of the organisers involved in last year's final at Exeter. And for me, I've been involved in the 12 Bell actively since 2013. That's when I first would put forward the idea for a live broadcast, and it has evolved, and I believe we have the audio from that very first broadcast. On the 23rd of March 2013, the top 19 change ringing teams in the country competed at Three Towers. 228 ringers, all with one thing on their mind. Their aim, a place in the final of the most pressured change ringing competition in the world. 9 teams have made it through, but there can only be one winner. Join us at Ripon Cathedral on Saturday the 22nd of June for the ultimate battle of the 12 Bell bands. This is the National 12 Bell Final. Good morning and welcome to Ripon Cathedral. This is it. This is the National 12 Bell Striking Competition. My name is Matthew Tosh and I'm going to be with you during the course of the day, bringing you all the news and happenings. Oh my goodness, I'm getting goose pimples just thinking of that moment. You know what? The setup was very primitive on that particular show. I had a very small table, one mixing desk. There were 2 microphones, one for me and one for the judges, and I had to swing it round when I wanted to get sound from the cathedral, and I literally pointed the microphone at a speaker. My goodness, how things have changed. And I do owe a huge thanks to Gareth Lawson, who is the producer who came on at the subsequent competition that was taking place in Oxford, the final in Oxford, 2014. That was a groundbreaking time, because that was the first time we ventured into YouTube territory. And I need to take a moment to thank Simon Bond and all the team at Oxford, Christchurch, Oxford, for making that possible. More recently, we've had Matthew come on board and help us with some of the vision stuff, and he's monitoring very carefully today our stream. We are aware we've had a few little hiccups, particularly when we've had the Skype callers on. And a massive personal thanks, and also thanks from the production team, must go to Rob Convey, often an unsung hero of our live broadcast, because he's dealing with the people behind the scenes. So right now he's on the phone lining up the rest of the guests for this afternoon, and making sure that we keep to time. So every now and then I get a little voice in my ear saying, hurry up, or slow down. You can pad things out a little bit. Rob is my rock for this broadcast. So thank you very much, Rob. Right, okay, let's take our minds back to last year and Exeter. And Paul Pascoe was one of the organisers. I was particularly interested to catch up on his reflections of last year, but also I couldn't resist the opportunity to ask him, how is the decision on what is wrong made? One of the frequently asked questions I get is, why does it always seem to be a limited set of methods and principles? That's clear. Stedman is a principle that only featured in the final. Why don't teams get really pushed to ring something like Bristol or Zanu or something much more challenging?
Well, it's been mentioned several times at the committee level, where why don't we ring Bristol, or why don't we things like that as a Maximus method? But the main problem with those particular methods is, Bristol will probably discourage people from entering the competition in the first place. And it was said that maybe on an occasion we may ring Bristol for the final in the competition. But particularly with Bristol and Yorkshire, you're just hunting around your coursing bells all the time. So the rope side is fairly easy for those methods. What you get with Cambridge Maximus, for example, is that the little bells are working all in amongst the big bells, and there isn't an easy, I won't say an easy coursing order, but there isn't a coursing order there with where you have sort of Yorkshire. So it's actually mixing up all the bells, so making it more challenge, but also keeping the method itself simple.
And of course, you have the advantage with something like Stedman or even Erin, where you can really mix those up. And I noticed when I look through the touches, it's almost like they've been designed on purpose to force little bells amongst the large bells.
Well, yes. For example, this year the 12 bell chose the touch for the eliminators as a relatively straightforward service touch for a 12 bell bound on a Sunday morning. It's a 2-course touch. It's relatively straightforward with not too many calls, finishing with the 8, 10, 12s at the end of the touch. Now, it's all very well doing that for a final, but the trouble is you've got the top 10 teams from around the country all trying to compete for the trophy, and if you make it another simple touch in that vein, then it is going to be harder to separate them. So you need something slightly different that maybe the bands aren't used to, providing you still have the music, of course, that is something different, so they can actually separate the bands from themselves. Because you end up with something where we had a glorious day at Cambridge the year before, we had lovely bells, we had lovely ringing all day, yet the top 6 or 7 teams, there was only a few odd percent between them.
Hello.
We are
the Cornish 12 Bell team.
And you are
Watching not
the 12 Bell Live. That's all.
Stand.
Well, I don't know whether you noticed there, the little bits of paper they were holding up had the greeting, "You're watching Not the 12 Bell Live" in Cornish. Very, very good. Thank you to the Truro Ringers there for their ident. Really enjoying seeing those. So we've been talking there. Paul Pascoe was explaining how that decision about why don't we choose more interesting, but more advanced methods than things like Cambridge and Stedman. Actually, I shouldn't call Stedman a method. It's a principle, isn't it? But that's why you see things like Cambridge coming up consistently at the finals. It's the most commonly used method out of what people are ringing. And it's because it provides a bit more challenge for the bands taking place. But you don't want to push it too much because it could discourage people from taking part. Well, speaking of people taking part, there are a few people who it would have been their first contest this year, the first final. And one such person is Emily Hall. And so I asked her about her introduction to 12 bell ringing and how she's coping with no ringing at the moment.
Back in the day, when I was still living with my parents in Chesterfield, one of the Melbourne ringers actually wanted me, I think had sort of talent spotted me in a sense. And he wanted me to go down to the Melbourne practices once a month on a Thursday is when they practice, but it's choir practice on a Thursday, and my dad is the choir master and organist, and he wouldn't let me go. Ooh. So I wasn't allowed to go to the Melbourne practices until I moved to university, and I'd forgotten all about that, to be honest, until I moved to uni. And my boyfriend was like, "Oh, I've been going to these practices at Melbourne, do you fancy coming along?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, a bit scary, 12 bell ringing. Okay, I'll turn up." And he says, on the drive there, he was going, "Well, I haven't really learned everyone's names yet, because I've only been going, for a couple of months. I'll do my best to introduce you to as many people as possible, but I haven't learned everyone's names." And I walk up and I go in and they're like, "Hi, Emily, nice to see you here." And I knew everyone in the room, because they're all Derbyshire ringers, which is where I'm from. And he wasn't very happy about that.
That you slotted in so quickly, you're kind of known before you turned up. But then there is that great thing about ringing it anyway, because it's like no other hobby. I don't know what your thoughts are. You wherever you go in the UK, if people know you're a ringer, you can settle down very quickly into a new part of the country, and you're welcome with open arms. I mean, where on earth does that come from?
Absolutely, I love it. And it's the same, with holidays. What else do you do? Because my parents own a caravan, so a lot of our holidays were in the caravan. And what do most people do in the evenings? They play games, have a massive family argument, and go to bed angry. Whereas we go ringing, because we've spent the entire day together on this family holiday. Let's be honest, by the time it gets to 7 o'clock at night, you don't want to be talking to each other anymore. So you go ringing, you get to meet other people, they tell you the best pubs to go to, they take you to the pub if they're really good, and they also tell you the best places to visit.
Anything going on with the University Society or ringers locally that are keeping people in touch in these bizarre times?
So I live in Beeston. In fact, as soon as I moved out of Paul's, I moved into Beeston. So I've been part of the Beeston Ringers for how many years that is now, can't remember. 4. That sounds about right. Uh-huh. Yeah. And we have a Teams meeting every Wednesday evening. We all have a catch up, and it's really nice. In fact, I really enjoy the community feel with those ringers, because I got really bored. My housemate Lydia and I, who's also a ringer, we're all ringers in the house. We're a bit weird. We made some lip balms and some hand creams. And we used our daily exercise to go and deliver them to everyone. We got bread and cake and all sorts of stuff back. It was fantastic. I wasn't expecting it.
That's a lovely idea, because I know this is not the case for everybody. I mean, not all ringers have been able to set themselves up like that. There'll be some that are a little bit intimidated by technology. And today is an opportunity to reach out and just give them a message of hope, I guess, that we are one community, that we're all together. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you did have a message for a ringer, whatever their age, finding it a bit tough at the moment, what would you say to them?
Reach out to your friends. Make sure that you're in contact with somebody, because the last thing that ringing is fantastic at bringing oddballs together. And I know that it's not easy if you're an oddball in this situation because you don't know who to turn to, you don't know who to talk to, reach out to one of your ringing friends because they will most likely be feeling exactly the same.
Hello, I'm Hat Morgan.
I'm Alex Taft, and this is my daughter Brighton Taft.
Hi, I'm George.
My name is Ann Martin.
I'm Meredith Mars.
I'm Levita.
I'm Susan.
I'm Kemp.
I'm Quilla Roth with the Washington Ringing
We're with
Society.
the Washington Ringing Society.
The Washington Ringing Society.
And you're watching Not the 12 Bell.
Not the 12 Bell. Not the 12 Bell Live.
Oh, it's adorable. Smile gets me every single time. Thank you so much for sending that one in as well. Interesting message from David Stanford on Twitter. He said the 1987 Eliminator at Bedford could have been the first attempt at using technology for the 12 Bell. Martin Marriott and myself installed studio quality microphones and an amplifier, but unfortunately were unable to overcome unwanted radio interference. So there's another story there just coming through from people who've been involved. And that was through on Twitter. So thank you very much for that that message. Got method on the brain, haven't I? Right. Strange situation that we're in at the moment. And so we are having to cope with not doing real actual ringing in towers. But there's been an extraordinary surge of interest of doing things online. Many of you will be familiar with programs like Able and Mabel that can help you practice ringing methods and timing and things like that on mobile devices, laptops and computers. But with the wonders of the internet, certain people have risen to the challenge of developing tools that can help us stay in touch. So that's what we're going to focus on now. The first one we're going to start with is Ringing Room. And I spoke to Bryn Reinstadler and Leyland Kuzma, who are the creators of Ringing Room. And I began by asking how on earth they came up with the idea.
So when we had just finished our very last practice, we had a serious sit down with our tower and we decided, maybe we shouldn't be ringing anymore because of the new coronavirus guidelines. And at that time, there wasn't yet guidelines from the government or from the church.
Yeah, so we're both based in the Boston area. Our home towers, the two of them, are the Church of the Advent and Old North here.
And we went home and we said, well, where are we going to get our ringing fix from now? So we said, okay, well, how are we going to fix this, basically? And we sat down at our kitchen table, and I remember very clearly, we went through all the different options for names, ringing chamber, no, what are we going to settle on? We settled on Ringing Room, bought the website, and started development at the end of March.
So I just recently finished a PhD in something entirely unrelated to software development. I was studying linguistics and found myself newly unemployed and out of school and unemployed right as the crisis started. And so I had a lot of time on my hands, but I've spent the last few years, I used coding as some part of my research to sort of process data and things like that. And then also I've maintained my own personal website.
Yeah, and so I'm a computer scientist. I'm studying for a PhD right now at MIT. So lots of coding background, although not actually any web development background. So that's mostly been Leland, although we've been talking a lot through sort of design and how you do best practices and, getting us set up with modern technology like GitHub for version control.
So when you did you just start with a blank sheet of paper and list what you wanted? We want a way of people ringing together. It's got to be real time. I mean, talk me through that process.
Well, it's funny because I actually don't think we had as much of a conscious process as one might have hoped. We knew we wanted it to be really broadly accessible. So we both have Macs, so a lot of ringing software is for PC. And we were like, okay, well, we need something that works for us and that we can test on our own computers. So an internet app seemed like the best way. And then as we kept developing, we realized how much it enabled us to let everyone really partake who had an internet connection. So it kind of grew organically from a blank sheet of paper into what it is today.
I think when we first started the process, I was imagining it as a platform for a few people to ring some poor peels on and nothing more. But it pretty quickly became clear that its actual strength was in helping tower communities come together for practices during this time. And so we've pretty quickly moved to focusing on, like Bryn said, making it as broadly as accessible as possible. We want it to be easy to use. We want anybody to be able to go, take their computer and get started immediately if they can.
What's been your biggest challenge so far?
Well, the biggest technical challenge in developing something like this is the latency. So it just takes time for information to travel back and forth between your computer and the server that Ringing Room is hosted on. And how much time it takes depends on things like, the strength of your local internet connection, how much traffic there is, how much information is trying to be used on the lines between, your computer and the server. So not only is there a delay between, when the server learns about the information, but that delay is variable. And so we've had to do a lot of work to try to make sure that that delay is as low as possible so that it's not interfering with people's ability to maintain a rhythm. And even still, I think that this is an open problem. It turns out to be a very hard, unsolved problem in the design of internet applications in general. Doing anything in real time over the internet always runs into this problem. And so we are struggling with ways to solve the problem in the ringing context specifically.
But I imagine there are things that we could do as ringers to minimise that. I mean, one thing that springs to mind is not having somebody upstairs watching HD movies from Netflix.
Absolutely. So like Leland was talking about, one of the big things that determines how much latency or lag you experience between sort of pressing the key and hearing the bell ring is how long it takes for the little bit of information about the bell to go to the server and then get back to you. So if there's also information about someone's Netflix show going to some other server and coming back to you, you can imagine that it sort of clogs up the pipes, as it were. So there are a variety of best practices available on our website. But the long and short of it is using a sort of modern computer with a Chrome browser and having as few other people on the internet using resource-intensive tasks is the best shot you have at having a really good experience on Ringing Room. And we've definitely seen and been part of Ringing that has gone along quite steadily on Ringing Room with everyone sort of at a good setup.
You do realise you've just given lots of ringers license to hog the internet connection of their house. We saw it on the telly, we saw it on YouTube. They said nothing else must happen.
Well, it's just an excuse to get the whole family on Ringing Room at the same time, right? Now
that I like. I cannot argue with that. So if someone is watching this, I mean, where do you start? I mean, do you need an account for the website? What happens?
Yes, so you do need an account. It's very easy. You can just go to ringingroom.com and click the login/sign up link in the top right and create an account there. It only takes a few seconds. We need, your email address which you'll use to sign in, and then you'll pick a username, which is how you'll be identified when you're in a virtual tower later. But once you've created an account, you can either create a new tower just by giving it a name and going to it, or if you're trying to join an existing practice or a tower that someone else has created, they'll have a 9-digit code that they will have given you, and you can plug that into the box on the front page, and there you are in the tower ready to start ringing.
Are you keeping stats on how it's used? Is there a popularity with, say, for example, 6-bell ringing, 8-bell ringing? Are you getting a sense of how the system is being used?
That's a very good question. And no, we don't have stats on that at the moment. We do have stats on sort of when people normally come to the site. So it has turned out to be true that most people have kept their usual evening practice time in the UK. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, starting at about 7 UK time, that's when all of a sudden the site gets very busy. We think largely being used for local practices all across the world at this point. In that vein, it's probably very often being used in the sort of tower bell mode as opposed to the handbell mode. So with one person per bell.
Yes, although notably our inaugural quarter peal on the platform that we used to announce Ringing Room was a handbell quarter, in fact. But I agree. The majority of the ringing from reports that we get, and we do get a good number of reports from ringers either by email or by Facebook, has been that people are using it for local practices, but also to teach their friends and teach people who maybe hadn't heard of change ringing before all the quarantine started.
So we've had a number of reports of brand new learners who had never touched a rope before quarantine started, or he picked up a handbell, who are now, at least playing hunting, sometimes ringing bob doubles.
The National 12 Bell broadcast is supported by John Taylor & Co., the Loughborough Bell Foundry. Visit taylorbells.co.uk.
Well, amazing to hear how a ringing room could perhaps help teach people, particularly whilst we can't go to towers. What a lovely outcome if we can still help teach people to get the basics of method ringing and things like coursing orders. Great stuff. Now, development is a very slow process, and Bryn and Leyland were telling me that they have a development team working behind the scenes. There's been an iterative process, and people have had to test the platform. So rather than just talk about it, we thought we'd actually give you a demo. So we've amassed a band together who are standing by, and they are going to attempt to ring some Bristol Maximus.
Look to Trebles going and gone.
Interesting. I've just been informed that the audio wasn't going out there. I could hear it here, and I could hear it in my ear. So we'll try and get that back for you. It is actually a pre-record, and they did manage the first full lead of Bristol Max for us, and it's quite impressive because when you're working with that, there's all of the latencies and people's different internet connection speeds, as you heard Bryn and Leyland talking about. So to actually come together and ring Bristol Max is quite a feat. But if you look at Bellboard, you can actually see some performances that have been logged on the virtual platforms. Bellboard is one of them. Very shortly, we're going to be talking to Graham John, who has developed Handbell Stadium. And I should also just give a shout out as well to David Richards, who's been involved in development of something called Muster, which allows people to use the Able ringing simulator to ring with people in other places. Well, I'm being told now that we can have another go at this ringing room demonstration. So we'll bear with us, that little introduction at first. You'll see the ringers getting ready, and hopefully we should hear some Bristol Max.
Look to Trebles going and gone. Go next time.
Extraordinary stuff, isn't it? That was that was Ringing Room, and I must say a big thank you to Mark Davis for organising that single lead of Bristol Maximus. And you heard that was an incredibly experienced band, and they had a few issues because there were some latency issues and connection issues, slowing down some of the signals going to people, and they still managed to get it back very quickly. So thank you to Mark Davis for organising that. Let's just remind you of who was ringing. I've got the band list here. So in order from the treble, it was David Pipe, Liz Barnes, Craig Homewood, Kath Furman, Jenny Town, Graham Furman, Robin Hall, Mark Bell, Phil Barnes, Mark Davis, Nick Brown and Alex Byrne. Absolutely. I think that is a first, having had that broadcast on live anyway. We have seen them doing things for the BBC as well. So thank you very much to that band. Now, I mentioned Muster, the add-on for Able, but handbell ringers have had a bit of a treat because you can ring handbells on these platforms by pressing more than one key. So, like for example, if you're using Able, you can press the J key and the F key to ring more than one bell. Similar keys can be used in Ringing Room for ringing more than one bell, but it doesn't really mimic the movement of handbells. Enter Graham John, who I've got on the line at the moment, and he's going to tell us a little bit about this thing that has been developed called Handbell Stadium. Good afternoon, Graham.
Hello, Matthew.
Hello. So, how did it all start?
Well, I think I was well aware of the ringing that was going on in 2013, which was a handbell peal that was rung online. So that handbell peal was run over a very fast internet connection between Derby and Edinburgh, and that was something I was sort of aware of in the background, but also aware of the technical issues that are associated with ringing online using video conferencing. So there was a lot of discussion about that early in the days when we saw lockdown coming, and my son was with me at the time. He was having his kitchen fitted, so he was actually living with us, and did so for about 4 weeks after that. And he's a very good software developer, and we basically cooked up the scheme for Handbell Stadium.
Now, this platform is a bit different to things like Ringing Room and Able, isn't it? Because you're not actually using keystrokes, you're not using the keyboard to operate the bells.
No, so that went back to 10 years ago when these motion controllers started appearing on the market, and we thought, I thought, could these be used with Able? And we had a little project, and we got them working with Able.
Graham, I think just for the benefit of people watching, not everybody will be familiar with what a motion controller is. Could you kind of describe what it is?
Yes, I mean, I don't know whether you could put me on video briefly because I could.
I will ask my producer. He may press a button.
Yeah, I can show you what one.
Okay.
Yep. As you can see, it's small and light, but one of the things you can do is attach it to a handbell like that, and then you've got a handbell that feels like a handbell, but actually it's sensing the movement of the handbell.
Graham, we'll try and get your images. At the moment, we're not quite getting your images coming through at the moment. So, so the motion control, I mean, how are we talking? Maybe 3 or 4 inches in length, sort of thing?
It's about 3 inches in length. These are quite small ones. I mean, they're a bit too small, really, to be used on their own. So you really need something to weight them to make them feel more like a handbell.
Yeah, I must admit, I have had a go with these things, and they were a USB plug into a computer, and they were the bits of they felt like holding very lightweight plastic sticks, and as a handbell, I didn't have things like the bells behind me here, and I found that very, very difficult. So it's interesting to hear, I suppose, people's sort of hacks of simulating that feel.
Yes, and they're getting better and better. And one of the things is that these controllers are not available anymore. So we're looking at a way of trying to provide an alternative. And there are some people I've been talking to. There's a guy called Tim Hart and another guy called Ben Johnson, and they both printed 3D printed dummy handbells, and these look really impressive. So they're putting the electronics in it that Simon Gay's been working on, but my intention anyway is to try and actually produce a prototype that we could go into small scale production, that ringers could actually buy some of these ready-made dummy handbells off the shelf.
Amazing stuff. This is extraordinary. I mean, we're actually getting messages coming through from people who are watching the show saying it's amazing to see how resilient and creative ringers are proving at this time when we can't actually physically get together. And Handbell Stadium is a great example of this. Can you just describe, I mean, you had a little bit of a teaser on the screen a couple of minutes ago, what the interface is, what's the screenshot? Because it is very different to the other platforms, isn't it?
Well, one of the things that, I mean, we sort of cracked the initial problem of trying to communicate over the internet. So that was sort of cracked. But we had a 2D visualization of the bells on that. And it's still quite hard to see where your bells are. And I'm very impressed. We just saw Ringing Room. It would actually be able to see sort of images on a screen and translate that into what you would experience in the tower is very different. Yeah. So the real breakthrough was actually starting to use a 3D gaming platform, and then you actually get a real impression of being there, ringing your bells, and the equivalent of rope sight you get on handbells is very similar when you have that 3D environment. And I think that is a massive breakthrough. And it's not only the internet aspect of it, it's the ability to practice. Handbells have always been something very hard to practice on your own, even with Able and the other simulators. And actually this visualization makes it much more like the real thing.
Yes, well, I can vouch for that. I definitely can vouch for that. It is very, very difficult. And we're going to have a video in a moment because you very kindly sent through a little excerpt. I think it's a Peel we're going to watch, some Yorkshire Major. I think we saw a little bit of it on the screen there. But Graham, if people want to find out more about Handbell Stadium, is there a website they can go to?
There is. It's just called handbellstadium.org. And if you go there, you'll find all the information you need and the ability to download the software.
Graham, John, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate your time. Sorry we're a bit delayed with our technical issues here, but it just shows you we are having issues as well as the issues that you have helped overcome with your development of Handbell Stadium. So handbellstadium.org is the address you need to go to if you want to find out more about it. And we await the new sensors. Thank you, Graham.
All right, thank you.
Right, let's see if we've got that video now of Handbell Stadium in action. You're going to see some different views and that 3D simulation that Graham was just talking about.
is Jim, James or Jamie Hughes, depending on who you are. And you're watching Not the 12 Bell Live.
What an extraordinary display. Remember, each of those bells was being controlled by a human being over the internet with their motion controllers. So it is phenomenal development that's going on. And these developments are continuing all the time. And if you've not been aware of them, well, we've made you aware of them now. It's not for everybody because some people like a bit of time away from screens in the evening, and we totally respect that. But it just shows you there are some things out there to help us at this time. Just had a message from Annabelle Florence as well on Twitter, who says, seeing the ringing room display is making me realise that I have totally forgotten Bristol Max. And Mark Humphreys Green says the Handbell Stadium video looks like something out of Harry Potter. Great stuff, Graham. Hashtag 12bell. The other version of it is there's another button you can press if you want the full graphic experience, and it puts people in, and it's like ringing with people. I think they look like Arnold Schwarzenegger out of Terminator, or Men in Black, that kind of thing, a kind of stern look with the shades on as well. So you can have people if you don't want the Harry Potter style invisibility cloak handbell ringers. Okay, now I am getting told off because we forgot to say thank you to Hayley Barnett and Mark Bell. Unfortunately, we had to say goodbye to them a little bit early because whenever we've been running Skype this afternoon, it's been sucking up our bandwidth and affecting the YouTube stream, affecting my pronunciation as well. And we felt that had to take a bit of priority. So thank you so much, Hayley and Mark. They have been incredibly understanding and very supportive of the project right from the word go when they made the official first initial approach. So thank you so much to them and the rest of the 12 Bell Committee. Now, speaking of the organisation, it's time to look ahead to next year, where at the moment it looks like we're going to Guildford, and I spoke to Neil Buswell, who is heading up the organisation of the Guildford preparations.
Planning started early. It's about 2.5 years ago, around about late 2017. We first considered the idea. We needed to get Guildford ringers on board, and they were very keen about it. But not only the Guildford team, but the wider Guildford ringing community, because we need lots of volunteers on the day. Then the next step really was to get the Dean and Chapter on board as well, because that's very keen and vital. And they were really enthusiastic, which was really good to see.
I was going to ask about that because it's not always straightforward. Did they get any sense of how important this event is? Did you have to do much persuasion?
Well, myself and Chris Rogers went along for a couple of meetings with their departmental heads. And we explained how the contest works and everything in quite a lot of detail. We said how big a contest it is. And then more recently, shortly after the Exeter final, we showed them quite a lot of detail about what had happened at Exeter on the day and the programme and everything else, and gave them some photographs and things so they could see just how big an event it was. And so far, they've been really enthusiastic about it and really supportive, which is a great help to us. A number of us have been to the last two finals to see how it's done, which is Cambridge and Exeter. And for both of those, we're really, really impressed. They were both incredibly good days. But there is a lot of organisation going on.
Neil, can I just ask, when you did go to, you set foot in Cambridge to have a look, was it daunting? Do you think, oh my goodness, we've got to do this kind of thing? I mean, because there is a risk of that. You go to a very well organised event and you're making your first steps. What was that experience like?
It's a bit daunting because both Cambridge and Exeter were very well organised, and they had literally 50, 60, 70 pages of documents about what was doing, which they're kind enough to share with us. So it's daunting when you read through all of that, just how much is needed, really. And not to say anything against all the contests before Cambridge and Exeter. I think we've had a number of good finals for a large number of years now. One of the big selling points, really, for people to come along to the final was there's lots of space. You've got the big cathedral, and you've got a very large cathedral green area at the front of the cathedral, which is ideal for a marquee. And so hopefully we can have a big space and lots of room to move around for lots of ringers. And also I mentioned for Phil Ridley, one of our younger ringers. He's about at least 30 years younger than me, so he understands about things like social media, and he's in charge of our social media, and he wants to launch that as of today. So fairly shortly, people will start to hear some things on social media about how they can get involved as well.
Is there a sense of anticipation?
Yes. At the moment, I think we're all excited about it. There's not much nervousness, but we're very keen that it goes right on the day itself and we get it right. And I just have a feeling it could be one of the all-time great finals, because I think what's happened this year, with missing out on the 2020 final, we all realise just how much we love 12 bell finals. So next year, if it all goes ahead as planned and is really good, I think we'll all really celebrate that and think this is an extra special thing, and just realise how much we enjoy 12 bell finals.
Well, lots to look forward to. Now, if you've ever been to Guildford Cathedral, you know that the ringing chamber is enormous, as we heard Neil saying there, but it has this extraordinary feature of two stairways, one up and one down, so you can have a one-way system. So even if we are having to make do with physical distancing rather than social distancing, then that could be an assisting factor. And if all else fails, well, Neil has a solution for social distancing.
As I mentioned earlier, the diameter of a ringing circle is very large. The back 6 ropes are all about 2 metres apart. So at the very least, we could organise a national 6-bell striking contest if we have to keep up the social distancing.
You're selling it well. Not sure that will get through the committee, but hey, we're thinking creative, and that's what it's all about. So just remind you, the date of next year's event at Guildford will be Saturday the 26th of June. Keep your fingers crossed. And those eliminators that we heard mentioned earlier, Hayley gave us a date for our diaries. It'll be Saturday the 27th of March. Of course, we don't broadcast the eliminators. We only broadcast the final because we can't split ourselves across 3 events. So Saturday the 27th of March, you've got Bury St Edmunds, Cornhill in London, and also Portsmouth Cathedral. Right, just having a look at some more messages coming through. Handbell Stadium suited ringers are referred to as the Mafia, apparently, by Wells Bells 1 on Twitter. Thank you, Andrew Deemer, for your message there. In fact, thank you to all of you who've been sending in messages online, on Facebook. We've had some lovely emails, some really nice thank yous as well, messages of support for the production team as well. That's really good. What else we got? We've talked about the cows. Sam Austin has been posting photos of Scousers at the 12 Bell Eliminator in 2010. It is a known fact that every now and then bands dress up when they come along to the final. So thank you very much for Sam for tweeting that. What we'll do after the live broadcast has come off air, we'll share some of those photos that you've been sending in. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So if you're just waking up and you're hearing me saying good afternoon, thank you for joining us. As with all our other broadcasts, it will be available and archived online. So give it a few hours for YouTube to encode. You'll be able to come back to this very page and watch the video again, watch some of the Andrew Wilby moments and anybody else that we've spoken to. So a huge thank you to all of the contributors who have made the programme possible, and my immense thanks for the support from the 12 Bell Committee. That is very much appreciated. Big thank you to Taylors as well for supporting us this afternoon, and for our entire production team, to Gareth Lawson, Matt Thusey, Robert Convey and me. We hope very much to see you next year.